Mic check 1 2. Hello. This is going to be Just Human episode 352. I'm recording this the morning after the election, and I already have recordings done of some of the documents we're going to go over in this show, which is all going to be focused on United States v. Comey. But I wanted to record the intro for it, and I wanted to give some thoughts on the elections that happened last night as part of the intro to this show. And there's one more shorter filing in United States v. Comey I'm gonna get at. So welcome. Hope you guys are doing well. I know that last night doesn't have the results that many of us would have hoped for, but I think it has the results that most of us expected if you've been paying attention to these campaigns. So yeah, let me get to my thoughts about it. First, I'll intro the show first. So welcome. My link tree is in the description of the show. It's also in my profile, wherever you're watching or listening to this. And there you can find all the ways to follow, all the ways to watch, listen, and all the ways to support. Thank you to everybody who's made purchases at Benson Honey Farms lately, or bootleg products, or Manly cans. When you use my affiliate link, they kick a few dollars my way out of your order. And thank you to everybody who has bought me cups of coffee at Ko-Fi.com. I am going through so many documents lately, and the coffee is absolutely necessary. And most of all, thank you to everybody who's a paid subscriber over at Substack.com. For $7 a month, you can help me stay caffeinated, and you can also fund my addiction to Pacer documents. I also want to tell you guys that I've started adding timestamps to all of my videos. So on Substack, it doesn't allow you, as far as I know, I can't actually make these hyperlink to the video, but you can look at the timestamp here and then go up here and click into the video to that chapter. But on Rumble, I can, if you're using the browser on Rumble, I now have timestamps you can click to get to the exact part of the show that you want to listen to, or skip past something you've already heard before. And same thing on YouTube, they're right here. You can use those to navigate. And on X, if you watch or listen on X, I made a typo here I didn't hit enter to space those out, but there's now timestamps on X. So I thought it was a good idea to do that just for ease of use, but I think it's even more important for me to do that now because I've been making these shorter videos covering some of the same material in a briefer format. Some of the same material that I'm putting in my full episodes of the podcast. So I wanted to give you guys a way to navigate past stuff you've already heard before. And this episode is going to contain one of those short videos, the motion for grand jury disclosures. I'm going to go ahead and put that into this video. So you may have already heard that before and you want to skip past it. All right. Thoughts on the election. Big losses. Can't put lipstick on that pig. And but not unexpected. Not unexpected at all that we were headed for a loss here. The polling showed that it was going to be a loss, and you know what? The opponents that Republicans ran against in New York City, in New Jersey, and here in Virginia, the opponents that were on the Ds that were on the ballot, some of them were pretty far out there, and they got some baggage, and they said some crazy things, and some of them are outright 100% Marxist. Others are just kooky. And another has been caught sending text messages about how he hopes his opponent's kids die. But they still won. And they won because the Republicans, their candidates were weak. Their candidates lacked a message. The candidates didn't have a great campaign ground game. And they pushed away support from Trump. And that is a recipe for a loss. And, you know, I had some strong words last night on some of this, and I'm going to stand by them, and maybe I'll add a little bit of nuance to them this morning. But I stand by what I said last night, which is that Democrats, you got to recognize what Democrats did over the past, 30 something days of the government shutdown. They used the government shutdown to create a vehicle for messaging what they were going to do for voters, that they were going to address the issues that the shutdown created, and they kept the government shut down. There's no two ways about it. Democrats intentionally kept the government shut down, even to the extent, even though it was harming the very people they were seeking to get a vote for, because they knew they could control the narrative and blame Republicans and Trump for the shutdown. And then they came in against mid-tier or lower Republican candidates who lacked adequate or any strategies to prevail. And they messaged on, we're going to fix these problems for you. We're going to be the big daddy government, and we're going to fix all these things. And when one side has weak or just terrible candidates who don't have a message of, here's what I'm going to do for you, and the other side has candidates who, even if they're kooky, even if they're wacky, their message is, here's what I'm going to do for you, the latter is going to win, especially with people who feel the suffering in some way. And I saw one example that is very local in New York and New Jersey, is that some of the government shutdown and the some of the cuts that have happened from Doge and some other things that are going on resulted in a lot of shutdown or delays in mass transit. And that's a huge issue in that locality. And so whether they rightly or wrongly assessed who was to blame for those things, one side was messaging on, here's how I'm going to fix it. The other side was not. And so those people, it's pretty easy to see which candidates they're going to go for. And now that the victories are in hand for the Democrats, guess what? Starting on Monday and Tuesday, Democrats suddenly wanted to meet with Republicans about a potential deal to fund SNAP and end the government shutdown. They intentionally waited and put off reopening the government and funding these programs so that it would be an issue they could campaign on. And if you've seen the commercials they've been running, you know that that's the case. And we saw there was reporting back when the government shutdown started that Democrats did not fear the government shutdown because they knew they could blame Republicans for it. Not get us to believe that message. It doesn't matter. We're not going to believe that message. What matters is that their potential voters, people that would be open to voting Democrat, would believe that message and would believe that Democrats would come in and help them. And that's what they ran on, and they use it. And it's sinister, but that's the way it is. And Republicans failed to seize that reality and turn it into their own campaign issue and put the responsibility on the Democrats while also offering an alternative that was a solution. It's fine where they tried to say, no, Republicans want to end the government shutdown. Democrats won't meet with us. But it has to be followed with a solution. It has to be followed with, here's what I'm offering to you. It's just the reality of how these things work. And I want to say something about Republicans who just weren't mid-tier or low-tier candidates, but who lacked an adequate strategy or any strategy at all to win. And I'm going to call one of them out by name, who is a perennial candidate, and that's Curtis Sliwa. And I remember Curtis Sliwa from his many appearances on Fox News back when 20 years ago, when I used to always have Fox News on, and my parents still to this day always have Fox News on in their house. And Curtis Sliwa is a regular on there. And I don't know if he was ever a serious candidate at some point in the past 3 decades. Maybe at some point in the past 3 decades, he was a serious candidate, but he hasn't been for as long as I can remember. And I don't know how you look at Curtis Sliwa as anything other than a spoiler candidate. And he looks even more so a spoiler candidate in a cycle like this, where it was absolutely impossible for him to win, always was impossible. There was never a path, and he didn't even pretend that there was a path. if you get into a deep analysis, which I've read and listened to other people do on how he ran his campaign, there was no intentionality there to win. The intention was to just run another campaign. Why? That's his identity. It's been his identity for 20 plus years that he is a regular candidate, and it's like a shtick that he does. It's basically his job to run for mayor in New York. And he got called out for it and got super defensive. He got called out on a radio show for it a couple weeks ago about why wouldn't you drop out and endorse Cuomo? Because Cuomo was the only guy who had a chance of beating Mamdani. And, you know, when you have stuff like that going on, which there are spoiler candidates like him in every party, in every election. We've seen them. It's not anything new, but it was that much more obvious this election cycle. And Mamdani should send a thank you card to Curtis Sliwa. He should, because if Curtis Sliwa would have dropped out many, many, many months ago and endorsed Cuomo and campaigned with Cuomo, and if he had gone to Trump and asked Trump to help them, and then if Cuomo had gone to Trump and asked Trump to help him against Mamdani, you would have Cuomo as mayor. Now, am I a huge Cuomo fan? No, certainly not. But this is a pretty easy choice. If your choices are Mamdani or Cuomo for governor of New York City, you're going to choose Cuomo every time. That's no defense of Cuomo. Now, I'm going to skip part of what I said here. Again, there's something else I want to say, but I want to say something. I need to say this first. So it was just 1 year ago that this was what the election looked like nationally. Just 1 year ago. And that tells you there is a way for Republicans to win and win big. It was done just 1 year ago. But you have to run great candidates who actually intend to win. You have to run smart campaign strategies with a big ground game. And I'll get into that in just a minute. You have to have messaging that's focused on the economy, number one. Number one. It is always the economy. Economy is always the number one issue. Whether it's local or state or national elections, the economy is always the most important issue and the most important thing for a candidate to message on. Security has to be next, and security, depending on the context, whether it's local, state, or national, within that capsule of security or that box of security are law and order issues, crime issues, immigration issues, terrorism, all those things. Police funding, firefighting funding, I would even say hospitals, like people feeling secure, perceiving that they are secure in their daily life and that their family is secure to go about their lives in that city or state or in the nation. And then the next issue can be called the future of that nation, state, or city. So a message that paints a picture of where we're going with that candidate. It's not like it's I guess it's like painting the dream, the intention of the campaign. I'm going to be a leader, and this is the future I'm going to lead this city, state, or nation to. There has to be some sort of vision for the future, and that has to be communicated in a way that tells a story that the voter wants to be part of. Those three are the most important. And then you have to be defined by your own words and actions, not by your opponent. You have to be defined by your own words and actions. You can't let your opponent define you. Now, we saw with this, I'm going to leave the last one for the very end. So with these candidates, I already mentioned how Curtis Lewa, he doesn't intend to win. He never intended to win. It's a grift. Running for president is a grift. Or running for president is a grift too. Running for any office, depending on how it scales, where you're at, can be a grift. And that's why you get these perennial candidates. Like, I'm trying to remember some of the ones that have run on the Republican side. There's one I can picture his face, and I can't think of his name. What was his name? I can't think of it. Anyway, ground game sucked for a lot of these candidates. Winsome Sears' ground game sucked. It sucked. The other thing, I'm in Virginia. I'm from Texas and will always claim to be Texan, but I've lived in Virginia most of my adult life. And I've been through Democrat administrations here before. And did not see an impressive ground game at all from Winsome. It was nothing like Spamberger's, and she needed it to be a big ground game in order for her to win. The other thing is that she didn't have good messaging. Her messaging was very moralizing, and it was arrogant, and she came across in the debate pretty badly. And it sucks because in the debate there was an obvious opportunity for her to continue momentum that she had gained leading up to that debate, and she could have just let Spamberger suffer in the debate. Spamberger had no answer for the question she was getting, and she was being exposed. And all Winsome Sears had to do was shut up. And she couldn't do it. She couldn't shut up. She kept patronizing and poking and interrupting, and she kept getting in the way of her opponent's mistake. It was horrible to watch. And she was that way because she was arrogant about it. I don't know why she was so arrogant. I don't know if she had some campaign people that were advising her that she was going to win and that the momentum was with her and Spamberger was declining and you got this, you just got to ride it out to the end. I don't know. I have no idea. But she did not run the campaign of an underdog. And when the moment arrived for her to step out of the way and allow her opponent to falter in the public's eye in that debate, she couldn't stop herself from taking the focus off of her opponent. And it came across as arrogant and worse. And then her commercials and other things she said were just moralizing. With the Jay Jones things is bad enough on his own. You don't need to moralize the audience. Just let that be bad and then distinguish yourself from it. Again, be defined by your own words and actions. And then the worst thing is that she was being defined by Spamberger as all the worst epithets and fear mongering that comes around with the Trump thing. At the same time, those commercials were running about how Winsome Sears is all the bad things about Trump and MAGA. She was pushing President Trump away. And so she let her opponent define her as all the worst things of a MAGA, and I know it's mudslinging, but the mudslinging stuck. The mud stuck. So, if you want to run a winning campaign, maybe you don't diss or distance yourself from the hugely popular president, and instead you ask him to give you a boost. All of these candidates, Citarelli, Cuomo, Sliwa, Winsome Sears, they all pushed President Trump away. And it cost him. It cost him big. Now, here's something I'm going to say that maybe is not going to be super popular, but I think it needs to be said. there's two parts to it. There's two parts to it. Yeah, let me get to this first part. So we got to learn the right lessons from a night like from Tuesday night. We got to learn the correct lessons of it. And one of the things that's been happening, especially since 2020, is people have been learning the wrong lessons or extracting the wrong lessons from losses like this. And that the wrong lesson, the worst possible lesson that you can take away from last night is to immediately blame it on some sort of rigging or fraud. Something like that. To do that immediately and without evidence is a cop-out on the level of blaming your failing grade on the teacher not liking you. It's a total abandonment of responsibility and reality. Fraud happens. Nefarious things happen. But you need to have some evidence before you go to that and then use that as the reason why you lost. And right now, in all of these elections, the reason why these candidates lost is immediately obvious. It's because they were weak candidates running bad campaigns. And it was obvious for months now that they were going to lose. Last night was not surprising. And to blame it on anything else than bad candidates running bad campaigns is to ignore the prima facie evidence that leads us to put blame where it goes. And if that's what you do, then you're not learning the lesson. You're not learning the lesson that is there and that we must learn if we ever want to get back to where we were a year ago with wins like this. The other thing I want to say is that there's turmoil in the Republican Party, and mostly the habitually online Republican Party, but it matters because faux and fair weather MAGA supporters are going to blame Trump for Tuesday night. They're going to blame him either directly or they're going to blame him through his subordinates by blaming people that work for him. And that narrative is one that Democrats are already embracing. That's the narrative that Chuck Schumer immediately grabbed onto and started messaging on, that tonight is a repudiation of Trump. And that blame Trump narrative is going to be, it's not going away. It's not temporal. It's that blame Trump narrative is going to be weaponized from now on through 2026 for the midterms. And it's going to be used by Democrats and by fair weather MAGA and rhinos to try and undermine Trump's agenda, to undermine Republicans in Congress, to undermine MAGA candidates in the next primaries, and to shift support back to uniparty establishment types in both parties. That's the goal of it. And one of the things that's going to really help them is all the BS that Tucker Carlson and the Groypers and all of these conspiracy brain-rotted anti-Semitic people, all of that junk and all of that infighting that they are intentionally creating is confirming the worst accusations against MAGA. Several years ago, when people threw out accusations of MAGA being Nazi or having Nazis in it, it was very easy to be like, what Nazis? Can't do that anymore. And it's because Nick Fuentes, who isn't a Trump supporter, and Tucker Carlson, who isn't a Trump supporter, and all of these types are injecting that sort of extremism into the party because they want it to be identified that way, because they're undermining it. They're undermining the leadership and they're undermining the identity of MAGA. Now, personally, I believe they're doing it on purpose. I think that Tucker Carlson is going to try and run for president. I also think that Steve Bannon is going to try and run for president. And I think both of those two people are purposefully undermining leadership in MAGA because they're hoping to co-opt and take a bunch of people from MAGA and run in 2028. We'll see if I'm right about that. But I am right that they are constantly working against Trump. I hope you guys can see that, because these last couple months, all the things Tucker Carlson has done over the past 2 or 3 months have fed into the Democrats' messaging strategy. The people he's interviewed and the things he said, it's horrible to watch. Now, the other thing about last night is turnout. Turnout sucked. Mamdani there was only 40% turnout in New York City. He won with something like 14%, 15% of New York City voters. The rest didn't turn out to vote against him. And I think for those of us who are political junkies, we don't really get this, because of course we go and vote, because we pay attention to politics all the time. But that's not how most people are. While I'm talking, I might be able to find the data. I was just looking at it earlier this morning. It's difficult for us who are political junkies to realize just how different we are from most people. Politics to most people is a soap opera that they peripherally gather information on. It's when they see it in TikTok videos or it comes across their Facebook feed. They're not paying attention to politics every single day. Even people who watch the news at night, whatever their news channel is, they're probably not all of them are political junkies on the level of me and you, who my typical viewer and listener to this show. It's just not something they think about all the time, and it's not something they're as informed on as we are. It's a soap opera. And that's why it's so important that your messaging be a message that can reach those people, because messaging on your bad things your opponent said or some sort of baggage doesn't reach a lot of people. The economy reaches people. You have to reach people where they're at. And where they're at is they're thinking about their bank account, their wallet, their security. And while we can sit here and we can make an argument, well, if they care about those things, this is why you should vote for this person over here. They don't know those things, and they don't know that candidate near as well as we do. And they don't even know the candidate that they're voting for as well as we do. Because again, they're not in this every day paying attention. And so we kind of get duped into thinking, and this is not unique to Republicans, this is on the right and the left. We kind of get duped into thinking that everybody who would be inclined to vote Republican would, of course, show up and vote Republican, or vote, in the case of New York City, of course, everybody who's a Republican is going to vote for Cuomo because they don't want Mamdani in. But that's not true. Elections aren't decided by the most engaged political junkies. Elections aren't decided by people who are the most informed. Elections are decided by people who kind of in the last 2 weeks of the election start to pay attention and then decide whether or not they're going to vote at all. And it sucks, but it's about turnout. And there's ways of increasing turnout, which a lot of these candidates did not engage in, and so they lost. And then there's ways of dampening turnout, which our opponents did engage in. And then you have people like Tucker Carlson and those types who are also dampening turnout on the Republican side, who are turning off voters who otherwise might have been open. And then kind of alongside that, you have people in the influence arena who are saying it's all fake and it doesn't matter and there's nothing you can do about it. And then that just makes people give up because they feel like their vote doesn't matter. So they don't vote. And that's how you lose. It's like we dupe ourselves into thinking there's more of us on the battlefield than there actually is. And then somehow we expect whenever the moment arrives, suddenly we realize we don't have as many people as we thought. So, okay, now the good news. Besides the fact that we absolutely can win these big elections. And small ones. 100% it's possible. 100%. Done it before just a year ago. Can do it again. In addition to that, think about what is going on since Trump took office. And think about how 2026 isn't going to be 2025. This is 2025. 2026 is going to be way different. Think about to a year ago how different the country was, and think about all that Trump has done over the past 10 months. Think about how much legislation has been passed. Think about how many things he's done that are their effects are slow to come about, but they're going to be significant and long lasting, such as the big changes in the economy, all the investment that's happening in the economy, the reopening of the energy sector, all the different trade deals that he's making, the tax cuts. All of these things aren't immediate gratification where you see results immediately. It takes time for the results to come back in. So it's like Trump has a ton of irons in the fire, and he's got a lot of fields that he's sown. And it's going to take time for all of those things to come back around and to come to fruition. And 2026 is the year that starts happening. And when you think back to all that Trump has accomplished, all the big decisions he's made, a lot. He's done so much in the past 10 months. So, and think about how different it is right now, sitting here in November of 2025, how much progress has been made for good in the country since January of this year. Now imagine being here a year from now and how much more is going to have happened, how much more is going to start bearing fruit, and it's just going to be a different thing. We will not be in 2025 and 2026. 2026 is going to be very different from where we are right now. So there is all the reason to hope and be optimistic about 2026, but we have to have the recipe. We have to have the recipe that succeeded and brought us this type of return. And that recipe was great candidates, smart campaigns with big ground game, a message focused on the economy, number one, security, and then an idea of the future, a vision for the future, defining yourself by your own words and actions, and then asking Trump for help. Not pushing him away, getting closer to him because he's hugely popular. That's the winning recipe. And candidates that run on that recipe in 2026 have a really good shot at winning. That's it. Okay. That's my take on the election. And now let's get to the documents. So this episode is again going to focus on United States v. Comey. There's tons of filings. You've probably seen a bunch of stuff from them going around in the news and online. There's a big filing that everybody's sharing the exhibits from, Comey's notes and some emails and some text messages. I'm not putting off getting to those. Well, I kind of am. I'm trying to do the docket in order, and I don't want to jump ahead to that filing and get into those exhibits before going through the other big filings in the case. So what this episode is going to focus on, let me show you the docket. So it's this one right here. The motion, it's the prosecution's response to Comey's motion to dismiss for vindictive and selective prosecution, which is a motion that doesn't have a lot of, it's the one I said would be very hefty. And it has like 80 pages of Trump's tweets and other things that he said against Comey. But I don't expect that motion to dismiss to succeed. I don't think that there is a case here that this is a vindictive and selective prosecution, even though it's a more compelling filing of that type than other cases might have, because President Trump has been so vocal for so many years about his personal animus towards James Comey. Okay. So that's the filing you're seeing the exhibits from that people are sharing online. And I haven't done a thread on this one yet because I'm still back here going page by page through these other filings. So what I want to do on this episode is I'm going to go through page by page this one right here, which is the motion to dismiss for indictment based on unlawful appointment. There's a response to that, which has changed my mind on the appointment of Lindsay Halligan. I'm telling you right now, my mind has been changed. And it's a long filing. It's going to be the bulk of this episode. It's going to be focused on reading that page by page. Some of it gets kind of slow going. And it's like, what? Like, oh, this is heavy. But it where it shines, it really shines. And it's completely flipped me. It almost flipped me immediately upon reading it. But I wanted to take some time to really digest it. And I have, and it's changed my mind. I don't think Halligan is going to be this indictment's not going to be dismissed because of Halligan's appointment. It's not. So those of you who, and neither will Letitia James case. It's not going to be dismissed based on that. So what we have today is a smaller filing, which is, where'd it go? I just lost it. There's a ton of amicus briefs that have been filed, which are friends of the court filing in support of one side or the other. There's tons of them. It's not that one. It's a motion for disclosure of grand jury proceedings. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the one that I haven't done a page by page read on. Let me check real quick. Okay, I went and checked, and it's true. I have not done a page by page reading of that filing. I have done this short video. It's like 13 minutes long. I did it 2 days ago, actually. And instead of putting this video into this one and like the brief overview of it, I'm going to do a page by page reading of it. And that's what I'm going to put into the video you're watching now. So that's what's up next. Let me, is it this one that's open? No, that's the big one with the exhibits. That's going to be for episode 353. So for us today, we're going to start with, that's the motion to seal. We're going to start with Comey's motion to unseal portions of the grand jury, to turn over the grand jury material that was used to indict him. Because if there's something messed up about that grand jury material, it's called disclosure of grand jury material. This is a longer filing. We're going to start with this filing. It's 26 pages, and we're also going to have another big filing. I already recorded the video for it. And that's the one that is from Pam Bondi's own counsel, Henry Whitaker. And that's the one that changed my mind on the appointment of Lindsay Halligan. And that is a long slog. So we're just going to have these two big filings in this video. And then on the next episode, we're going to get to the one that has all the exhibits in it. Now, before I go in, I have one more thing to say about the election. Where did Republicans lose last night? They lost in New York, New Jersey, and Virginia. Are those bastions of conservatism? Are those traditionally Republican strongholds? If you find yourself kind of dooming out about the results from last night, which I haven't been dooming out. I hope I didn't come across that way, but I do feel it's a moment to have a reality check in the way that I presented it on the things I presented it on. So all of my criticism, I stand by what I said, but I'm not dooming out about it because Republicans lost in places where they typically do lose, in races where they typically do lose. And I actually love this state of Virginia. It's the one where they actually had the better chance, I would say, because it's more purple. But Virginia is still trending blue. As much as I wish for it to trend Republican, it's trending Democrat. And so much of that has to do with the DC suburbs. And guess what? People in the DC area work for the federal government. And guess what? They're shut down. So last night's results are not the kind of results you then turn into a black pill. And I hope none of what I said was a black pill. I hope it came across as a reality check, as a gut check. And then this right here is clarifying for you. Think about where we lost. It's not like we lost Texas, Iowa, Oklahoma, or something like that. We lost in Democrat strongholds where Democrats traditionally do win and win big, and Republicans always struggle. So that's my last comment on it. All right, now we're gonna dig into this motion here for grand jury proceedings. Okay, James Comey's motion and memorandum in support of motion to disclose grand jury proceedings. Comey, by and through his undersigned counsel and pursuant to Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E, moves this court to order the disclosure of the transcript and audio recordings of the grand jury proceedings. The indictment at issue, which facially misstates Mr. Comey's testimony, was sought by an inexperienced prosecutor and returned after business hours with a meager 14 votes after an earlier no true bill. Those facts, in combination with signs of other potential misconduct, indicate that a ground may exist to dismiss the indictment. Accordingly, disclosure of grand jury proceedings is warranted. This is a big ask. This is a big ask. We'll see how it works out for him. In fact, I happen to know what the judge decided. And by the time you're listening to this, you may know too. We're going to go ahead and go through the filing. The record in this case raises significant risk that irregularities in the grand jury process may have influenced the grand jury to return an indictment. Thus, pursuant to Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E3E2, Defendant James B. Comey Jr. respectfully requests that the court direct the government to disclose the transcripts and audio recordings of all proceedings before the grand jury in this case. Although proceedings before the grand jury are typically entitled to a presumption of regularity, the abundant irregularities surrounding the return of the indictment in this case overcome that presumption and warrant disclosure of the grand jury record. Those irregularities may create a base a basis for dismissing the indictment. So that's the goal here, or at least as advertised, the goal here is get this material because there may be something that happened, one or more things that happened with the grand jury process, which renders this indictment incorrect, and it provides a basis to dismiss it. As Mr. Comey has explained in 2 motions to dismiss, the indictment arises. Good job, Kyle. Go ahead and skip down. The indictment arises. It arises. Oh, I've got it together today. I got it together today. I got it. Oh my God. I may need to start all over. The indictment arises from multiple constitutional violations. I don't know if I really buy that, but possibly. Those violations warrant dismissal regardless of any grand jury misconduct, but they also support a reasonable inference of irregularities before the grand jury. Additionally, the circumstances surrounding the return of the indictment in this case indicate that the government may have misstated key factual and legal issues to the grand jury. Despite the absence of any lawful basis for her appointment as interim U.S. attorney, Lindsay Halligan, a former insurance lawyer who lacks any prosecutorial experience, presented this case to the grand jury alone. She secured an indictment only after a highly unusual procedure, which included keeping the grand jury in court well past normal business hours. What is more, the agent who served as a witness in the proceedings may have been exposed to Mr. Comey's privileged communications with his attorneys and thus may have conveyed that information to the grand jury. Each of those irregularities provide an independent basis for the court to permit the defense to review the record of the grand jury proceedings in this case. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys this thing right here about Lindsay Halligan and whatnot. This is unusual. Someone with no prosecutorial experience going to a grand jury and keeping them there past hours. That's irregular. It's fair to call that irregular. The basis of her appointment, I now believe, is sound. And I think that is, I'm not worried about Lindsay Halligan getting, I've changed my mind on the lawfulness of her appointment, which we'll get to that motion later in this episode. But this thing right here about an FBI agent who served as a witness to the grand jury proceedings, having been exposed to Comey's privileged communications with his attorney, which would be, that's the stuff that's the subject of the filter protocol. That's the quarantined material, the seized communications from the Arctic Haze investigation that they got with 4 search warrants served on Daniel Richmond, who was attorney for Comey at the time. Attorney-client privilege on those communications has not been pierced yet. And so an FBI agent being exposed to those things and then communicating information from those communications to the grand jury, that would be grounds for dismissal of the case. That's the big uh-oh here, or potential uh-oh. But each of those irregularities, minus the appointment of Halligan, those provide a basis for the court to order the DOJ to turn over the grand jury proceedings, the transcript and the audio of it, to defense. Statement of facts. We can actually skip past a lot of this because we already know this, because it's just restating the case. And we already know this. Materials, and it restates, back in the Arctic Haze investigation, they got these search warrants. It went back to August 2017. And then when they closed that investigation, the government ultimately concluded that there was not sufficient evidence to criminally charge any person, including Comey or Richmond. And that is a direct quote from the government's own memos. Additionally, in March 2019, Barr appointed John Durham to special counsel, and he looked over everything. And as part of his investigation, he scrutinized whether the FBI had mishandled the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. Although the final Durham report offered critiques of the FBI's investigative standards, it did not find that Mr. Comey or any other senior FBI personnel violated any federal criminal statutes. In September 2025, and Durham was well aware of Arctic Haze. He opened it up and looked at it, and he was doing Tropic Vortex at around the same time. In September 2025, the team of Eastern District of Virginia career prosecutors interviewed Richmond, but he was, quote, not helpful in their efforts to build a case. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know if not helpful means he refused to answer questions, or if it means what he did answer didn't help them. There's more than one way to read that, right? So I don't know what not helpful means, but that's what it says. The government also reportedly interviewed Special Counsel Durham, who stated that his investigation had not uncovered evidence supporting charges against Comey. That is true. Multiple reports also stated that the career prosecutors ultimately concluded that no case should be brought against Mr. Comey, including because the evidence did not establish probable cause to believe he committed a crime. Footnote 1. As discussed in the defense prior motion to dismiss, these reports are corroborated by the absence of any career prosecutor from the September 25th grand jury presentation that resulted in the indictment charging Comey in this case, as well as the continued prosecution of this matter, which is handled by prosecutors from a different state and district. And that's also true in the Letitia James case. There's nobody from the EDVA prosecuting Letitia James or James Comey. Letitia James is being prosecuted by a prosecutor from Missouri. What do you make of that? I mean, I'm not really sure. I have some ideas about what to make of it. It could be that the EDVA prosecutors think that this is a sinking ship and they don't want to tie themselves, they don't want to board it. You know, they think that this isn't going to go well, and so they don't want to be a part of it. It could be that they said, look, we don't think there's a case there, and so we don't want to sign on to it. It also could be that they're not allowed on it, and that Halligan only wants certain people involved on it. There's a team that's been chosen for those two cases, and they've been chosen for specific reasons because of their skill set or something like that. Don't know. It's kind of something that you can read and it sounds bad, but I can see alternatives to where it's good. I could see it's not necessarily a bad or ugly thing that there's no prosecutors from that office on the case, but it is unusual, which gives grounds for the judge to grant this motion. The government also reportedly interviewed, already read that. In response, the Trump administration reportedly pressured interim U.S. Attorney Eric Siebert to indict Mr. Comey, among others. President Trump had nominated Siebert to the permanent post of U.S. Attorney, and Mr. Siebert had been unanimously appointed to continue as interim U.S. Attorney by the judges in the district, and therefore supervise the career EDVA prosecutors investigating this case. See, there were EDVA prosecutors looking at this, and they said there's no case there. There's not enough. We know that much, and we know some resigned or left. Did they leave because they don't have the balls to do it? I don't know. Maybe they left because they got really good job offers at law firms and they decided this is the moment to take those up. I don't know. All right, but when Mr. Siebert appeared unwilling to follow President Trump's instructions, Trump told reporters in the Oval Office that he wanted him out, and Siebert resigned on September 19th. The DOJ then demoted First Assistant U.S. Attorney Maya Song, and then she was fired. So she would have been the person who stepped up to take Siebert's place naturally. But nope, she was let go too. The next day, President Trump publicly posted a statement on social media explicitly pressing the Attorney General to prosecute Mr. Comey and Letitia James and Adam Schiff. And then we know about this post right here, which is just quintessential Trump. It's just the most Trumpian post. He's since deleted it. And there was some talk that maybe he meant this as a DM to Pam. I don't think so. I don't buy that. I think this was bait for the media to go crazy about and make up all sorts of stories about this and create more drama and intrigue about Halligan and this case. It's just all part of the show. All right, less than 48 hours after President Trump's post, Lindsay Halligan was purportedly sworn in as interim U.S. attorney for this district. Ms. Halligan was a special assistant to the president and a White House official. She had previously worked as an insurance lawyer and personal lawyer for the President Trump and had no prosecutorial experience. The Attorney General purported to appoint Ms. Halligan pursuant to 28 U.S.C. 546, which provides that the Attorney General may appoint a United States attorney for the district in which the office of United States attorney is vacant, but specifies that a person appointed through that mechanism may not serve beyond the expiration of 120 days after appointment by the Attorney General under this section. Halligan's appointment further states that Section 546 further states that if an appointment expires under subsection C2, the district court for such district may appoint a United States attorney to serve until the vacancy is filled. Because Mr. Siebert had previously been appointed under Section 546A and more than 120 days had elapsed since that appointment, the Attorney General lacked the authority to appoint Ms. Halligan under Section 546. That's according to their argument, and it's incorrect. As we'll go over in the next filing that we read on this show. On her fourth day in office, September 25th, 2025, Ms. Halligan sought a grand jury indictment of Mr. Comey, just days before the 5-year statute of limitations on Mr. Comey's purported offenses was set to expire. No other prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office for EDVA participated in the grand jury presentation. Footnote. The custom in this district is for the prosecutor who presented the case to the grand jury to sign the indictment, along with the U.S. Attorney. Here, only Ms. Halligan signed. Ms. Halligan appears to have called one of the lead FBI case agents as a witness. The same day the agent testified in the grand jury, he alerted the FBI Office of General Counsel, redacted, involving Mr. Comey and his attorneys. Uh-oh. The FBI Office of the General Counsel subsequently informed the agent that redacted in this case. Despite his apparent awareness of his potential exposure to privileged material, the agent nevertheless apparently served as a witness presenting evidence to the grand jury in this case. This is like siren blaring, like uh-oh. Now, it may work out okay, but this could be very bad. Based on evidence presented through that agent, Ms. Halligan first presented the grand jury with a 3-count indictment. The grand jury returned a no true bill on that indictment, meaning it failed. And by the way, these redaction blocks, it says in the footnote, the government designated discovery containing some of the information in these sentences as protected materials under the protective order in this case. Although the defense sees no reason why this information cannot be made public, out of an abundance of caution, the defense is redacting these sentences from public filing in the first instance. So we'll see if those are later lifted. I want to see, it says ECF number 7. I want to jump on the docket and look at docket entry 7 to see if that corresponds. That's redacted criminal case cover sheet. And does it give us any information about an agent? No, I don't think that's what it's pointing us to. -5 Exhibit E. This is 89-5. I was going to see if we could find a clue real quick to those redactions. I think I know what it might be. It's sealed response. We can't see it. It's sealed. Yeah, it's sealed. Okay. And that other one, did I read that correct? It was 7. CECF number 7. That's docket entry number 7. Electronic ECF means electronic case filing. But 7 was just the cover sheet. And I don't see anything on here about a federal agent. Yeah, it says page 1 of 1. Oh, in any case, I don't see any clues for us. Okay. Okay, no true bill. All right. Rather than leaving and reconvening on a later date, however, the grand jury remained well past normal court hours. If any of you guys have ever done jury duty or grand jury duty, you know that that's unusual. Is it sometimes the case that a judge keeps you there longer? Yeah. But courts don't like doing that because they don't want the jury, whether it's a trial jury or a grand jury, they don't want there to be even the appearance of there being some sort of pressure on the jury to go in one direction or the other. And that's one of the dangers of keeping the jury there late, is that the jury might feel pressured to go in a certain direction in order to go home. At 6:47 p.m., the grand jury returned a true bill on a new 2-count indictment by only a 2-vote margin. So really, I don't know what time the courthouse would have closed, whether it's 5, it's 4:30, 5, 5:30, I don't know, but this is probably about what, an hour and a half later than they should have been there at a minimum. Is it the biggest deal in the world? No. Is it irregular and a possible basis to want to get a look at the grand jury proceedings? Yeah. The fact that they had a 3-count indictment that failed, and then they came back with a 2-count indictment after hours that only passed by a 2-vote margin, is that a huge deal and it means the whole thing's messed up? No. Is it a basis for a claim of irregularity and for the judge granting a motion to allow the defense to look at the grand jury transcript and audio? Yes. Ms. Halligan's inexperience was apparent during the return proceeding as she expressed confusion about the indictment paperwork, including by signing both the 3-count indictment and the 2-count indictment. Now, it was pointed out to me that that is incorrect. She didn't actually sign both. A copy of her signature was attached to both. So if you look at this right here, and it's a distinction that's worth making. So here's the indictment, count 1, and then count 2. Okay, Lindsay Halligan right there. Okay, but when you go to the no true bill, which for some reason she filed, report of a grand jury's failure to concur in an indictment, it has count 2 there and it has count 2 here. So this should be count 3. But what's happened is they just attached they attached a copy of this same page that's right here. Look, they're the same. Let me zoom out to the same level. It's 172%. All it is a copy of it. It's the exact same signature. It's got the same, like, I don't know. They scanned the copy of it and just, I don't know. Does it make a huge difference? Probably not. But that's for some reason, that's what happened. All right. The indictment is facially flawed. Count 1 of the indictment charges Mr. Comey with making false statements to Congress in alleged violation of 18 U.S.C. 1001. The indictment alleges that on or about September 30th, 2020, Mr. Comey falsely stated to a U.S. senator during a Judiciary Committee hearing that he had not authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports regarding an FBI investigation concerning Hillary Clinton. The indictment further alleges that Mr. Comey's statement was false because, as Mr. Comey then and there knew, he in fact had authorized Daniel Richmond to serve as an anonymous source in news reports regarding an FBI investigation concerning Hillary Clinton. Count 2 charges Mr. Comey with corruptly endeavoring to influence, obstruct, and impede a Senate Judiciary Committee investigation on or about the same date by making false and misleading statements before that committee in alleged violation of 18 U.S.C. 1505. The indictment focuses on testimony that Mr. Comey gave in response to questioning by Senator Ted Cruz at Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. On September 30th, 2020, during that hearing, Senator Cruz described how, during 2017 testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, Mr. Comey had denied ever authorizing someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source on news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration. Senator Cruz then incorrectly asserted to Mr. Comey that Andrew McCabe, who previously served as Mr. Comey's deputy director at FBI, publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal, and that you, Comey, were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it. Mr. Cruz is wrong about all those things, but that's what he said. Senator Cruz asked Mr. Comey, who's telling the truth? Mr. Comey responded, I can only speak to my testimony, and I stand by the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017. Senator Cruz followed up by asking, so your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak, and Mr. McCabe, when he says contrary, is not telling the truth. Is that correct? In response, Mr. Comey stated again, I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today. The indictment misstates the exchange between Senator Cruz and Mr. Comey. Senator Cruz asked Mr. Comey to affirm or deny prior testimony that he authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source on news reports about the Clinton administration. But Senator Grassley's original questioning in 2017 spoke of the Clinton investigation. The indictment nonetheless mischaracterizes Mr. Comey as saying that he had not authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports regarding an FBI investigation concerning Person 1. And Person 1 is Hillary Clinton. Thus, the indictment replaces Senator Cruz's reference to the Clinton administration with a reference to Person 1 and misleadingly attributes statements to Mr. Comey that he did not in fact make during his September 30th, 2020 testimony. Folks, whatever you think of Comey, I just don't understand how you can have an indictment that does that. Not going to get off on this again and go down that road, but the indictment literally misquotes Senator Cruz and gives a false recitation of what Comey said, and Hillary Clinton wasn't asked about in the hearing. It's just totally, it's bastardized. It's a bastardization of two different instances of testimony, and then I don't know what. A bastardization of some information that came from Arctic Haze, I think, is what it is. Further, and that just doesn't work. Regardless of what you think about Comey or whether you think he did this or that or he's ultimately guilty of something, this indictment does not accurately characterize what took place or what happened. It's just not, it's not sound. Further, the indictment omits Senator Cruz's words that explicitly narrow the focus of his questions to Mr. McCabe and misleadingly implies that the questioning was related to Mr. Richmond. In fact, Mr. Comey's September 2020 exchange with Senator Cruz made no reference whatsoever to Mr. Richmond, who ultimately appears in the indictment as person 3. Instead, the context of the exchange confirms that Senator Cruz was asking about leaks by Mr. McCabe. Indeed, Senator Cruz asked Mr. Comey whether he or McCabe, quote, was telling the truth. In other words, the indictment presents an inaccurate description of the testimony at the heart of this case. Which, how can you have that? You can't indict somebody for a false statement when you say this question was asked and this is what they said and both are incorrect. All right, argument. Under Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E 3E2, a court may order the disclosure of grand jury materials, quote, at the request of a defendant who shows that a ground may exist to dismiss the indictment because of a matter that occurred before the grand jury. That rule strikes a balance between two competing principles of criminal law. The first is that courts have the authority to dismiss an indictment because of misconduct before a grand jury. That's United States v. Williams, 1992. That authority would be meaningless if defendants were unable to access grand jury materials and inform the court about that potential misconduct. At the same time, the proper functioning of a grand jury system depends upon the secrecy of a grand jury proceeding. We've talked about that quite a bit as regards Epstein and Maxwell over the summer. We talked about that a lot and how important sealing grand jury material is. For that reason, courts must exercise caution when determining whether to order the disclosure of grand jury materials. After balancing the relevant interest, courts may order disclosure under Rule 6E3E2 when defendants establish that particularized and factually based grounds exist to support the proposition that irregularities in the grand jury proceeding may create a basis for dismissal. That's United States v. Lochte and Guyon, 2004. And then another case, United States versus Abcasis, 1992. That standard prevents fishing expeditions to search for grand jury wrongdoing and abuse when there are no grounds to believe that any wrongdoing or abuse has occurred. So defendants can't just, every single time they get indicted, try and unseal the grand jury stuff. There has to be a basis for it, and that basis must be particularized and factual. There we go. But it also recognizes a consensus among district courts that disclosure is appropriate when a defendant demonstrates particularized need for grand jury materials. And that's United States versus Nigale, 2007. This case presents multiple particularized and factually based grounds that warrant disclosure of grand jury material. Let's see if we agree with that. Let's see if we agree that it does. Actually, ask yourself right now, where are you at? Do you think there's grounds here? If you were in Comey's shoes, and you were asking for this, do you think there's grounds for you to receive the grand jury materials? Got your answer? Okay, let's hear him argue what those grounds are. First, as Mr. Comey, and I'm going to ask you again. First, as Mr. Comey has explained in earlier motions, the indictment should be dismissed because it arises from real and substantial improper conduct that supports a reasonable inference of irregularities before the grand jury. Indeed, irregularities so severe and pervasive that they likely prejudiced the grand juror's narrow decision to indict, or at least gave rise to grave doubt that its decision was free from improper influence. More specifically, the train of events that led to this indictment involved public and prominent evidence that, one, it was driven by improper animus, and two, the prosecutor responsible for the case, because of her improper appointment, never should have been in the grand jury at all. Second, given the highly irregular procedure that led to the indictment, there is a significant risk that the government misrepresented key issues of fact and law to the grand jury. Indeed, as explained further in Mr. Comey's concurrently filed motion for a bill of particulars, the indictment itself fails to allege specifics necessary for Mr. Comey to understand and defend the charges against him. And we went over that in yesterday's video, or in episode 351, right? Third, the record suggests that an FBI agent who testified before the grand jury was potentially tainted by privileged communications between Mr. Comey and his attorneys, one of whom was likely Mr. Richmond, yet the agent still proceeded to testify in front of the grand jury. There is thus a serious concern that the grand jury may have improperly relied on privileged information. And I think this is the real big one. Of everything listed so far, I think that's number one. Each of these grounds independently warrants a disclosure of grand jury materials to allow the defense to show that irregularities warrant dismissal of the indictment. Accordingly, the court should permit the defense to inspect the transcript of all testimony before the grand jury, as well as any audio recording and transcripts of all colloquies between counsel and the grand jury in this case. You agree? Mr. Comey has filed 2 motions to dismiss the indictment based on the government's constitutional violations in the case. One of those motions argues that the government has singled out Mr. Comey for prosecution. We've already gone over that filing, and we're going to go over the government's response to that filing in the next episode. Such a vindictive and selective prosecution violates the First Amendment, the Due Process Clause, and equal protection principles. The other motion, which has been transferred to U.S. District Judge Cameron McGowan Curry, argues that the indictment is fatally flawed because it results directly from paradigmatic violation of the Appointments Clause and the statute authorizing appointments of interim U.S. attorneys. That's the motion to dismiss based on unlawful appointment of Lindsay Halligan. We've gone over that one already, and after we get done with this document, we're going to go to the government's response to that motion to dismiss, which I'm going to warn you, it's very good at the beginning, and then it gets kind of heavy. It gets kind of into the weeds and difficult to get through, and then it gets really good again. So it's worth, there's a part in the middle of it where it's kind of, this is dense, but then it comes right back up, and it's that next part that changed my mind. And I'll talk about it when I get there. Although those motions must be decided on their own merits, the circumstances described in both motions raise a strong possibility that there were irregularities in the grand jury proceedings that would provide a basis for dismissal of the indictment. Indeed, Judge Curry has already ordered the government to produce for in-camera review, meaning just for the judge to look at, all court documents or all documents relating to the indictment signer's participation in the grand jury proceedings, along with complete grand jury transcripts. Mr. Comey has argued that if Ms. Halligan alone secured and signed the indictment, dismissal would be required because she was unlawfully appointed. And if she was unlawfully appointed, Ms. Halligan's appearance before the grand jury violated federal rules of criminal procedure, which permit only attorneys authorized by law to conduct grand jury proceedings, and is one of the few clear rules which were carefully drafted and approved by the Supreme Court and Congress to ensure the integrity of the grand jury's functions. For similar reasons, disclosure of the grand jury materials is reasonably calculated to provide additional support for Mr. Comey's argument that he would not have been prosecuted but for President Trump's animus toward Mr. Comey, including because of his protected speech. Objective evidence establishes that the president harbors such animus. He has spent the last 8 years publicly attacking Mr. Comey's speech and character and calling for Mr. Comey to be prosecuted. The record also shows that President Trump prevailed upon Ms. Halligan to bring the charges, such that she could be considered a stalking horse. In turn, the government's manipulation of the prosecutorial process, including its repudiation of the views of every career prosecutor who assessed the case, makes clear that Mr. Comey would not have been prosecuted but for President Trump's animus. Personally, I don't think there's a selective and vindictive prosecution case here. Like, there's not a basis for that to be the reason to dismiss. But the fact that there is so much there to make that argument with, plus the fact that President Trump made that Truth Social post, and then Halligan gets appointed to an office where career prosecutors already rejected the idea of indicting Comey, and Durham did. In a previous investigation of the situation, the investigators wrote a memo saying they found no evidence to bring charges against Richmond, Comey, or anybody else. And then Halligan shows up 4 days after Trump makes that True Social post or thereabout and brings this indictment all by herself to a grand jury that was kept late and had an FBI agent possibly exposed to potentially privileged information. This is irregular AF. This is... Imagine if this was Rudy Giuliani or Dan Scavino or Stephen Miller. Like, just like flip the situation and change all the characters' parties, right? Like, it's just, there's a lot of irregularities is the best word for here. There's a regularity on top of irregularity on top of irregularity. Although dismissal of the indictment is warranted on the record as it stands, disclosure of grand jury materials would bolster Comey's arguments. Having served as his personal attorney and White House official, Halligan has a close, long-standing relationship. We know all this. Such irregularities in grand jury proceedings would create a basis. We know all that. All right. Risk that the government misrepresented material. The current record also reveals a significant risk that the government misstated key aspects of the charged offenses during its presentation to the grand jury. Yeah, because the indictment itself gets things wrong. And where a prosecutor's legal instruction to the grand jury seriously misstates the applicable law, the indictment is subject to dismissal if the misstatements cast grave doubt that the decision to indict was free from substantial influence of erroneous instruction. Accordingly, if the grand jury materials show that Ms. Halligan seriously misstated the applicable law and facts, the materials would provide an additional basis for dismissal. As explained in Mr. Comey's concurrently filed motion to dismiss based on fundamental ambiguity and literal truth, the court should dismiss count 1 because it rests on fundamentally ambiguous questions. The Supreme Court has made clear that precise, quote, precise questioning is imperative as a predicate for a violation of a false statement statute like Section 1001A2. And rightly so. Accordingly, an answer to a fundamentally ambiguous question may not, as a matter of law, form the basis for a false statement, for a charge. Here, the line of questioning that prompted Mr. Comey's allegedly false statements was fundamentally ambiguous because it included confusing compound phrases, alternated between broad and narrow questions, and was riddled with misstated facts. Despite the basic principle that Section 1001A2 requires the government to prove specific, false answers to specific, precise questions, the indictment does not identify the questions that form the basis for the charge, nor does it specify which of Comey's statements is allegedly false. Given that count 1 rests on fundamentally ambiguous questions, and that the indictment conspicuously omits those questions, there is a significant risk that the government did not explain to the grand jury that it was required to identify specific questions to support count 1. Failure to explain that requirement would constitute a serious misstatement of applicable law and thus would supply an independent reason to dismiss the indictment. I think this is a real threat here. I think this is a real threat to the case. Indeed, the grand jury's decision to return an indictment by only a 2-vote margin shows that any presentation of additional law or facts that was favorable to Mr. Comey likely would have led them to not return an indictment. The highly irregular procedure that led to the indictment increased the risk that the government misstated key legal and factual issues to the grand jury. As a general matter, the departure of a career prosecutor who reportedly determined that there was no probable cause to charge Mr. Comey, the subsequent installation of a White House official with no prosecutorial experience, and the resultant return of an error-ridden indictment by themselves support the finding that inherently suspect procedures were used before the grand jury. I have to agree. I think any reasonable person has to agree with that. The details of the grand jury proceeding that are currently in the public record reinforce that conclusion. All available information regarding Ms. Halligan's first ever grand jury presentation smacks of irregularity. It is virtually unheard of for a brand new prosecutor to make her first grand jury presentation alone, without the supervision and guidance of an experienced prosecutor to ensure the absence of factual and legal errors. Nevertheless, Ms. Halligan entered the grand jury alone to present a proposed indictment charging Mr. Comey in 3 counts. That first attempt apparently failed, resulting in a no true bill vote by the grand jury. Undeterred by her initial failure, Ms. Halligan did not excuse the grand jury for the day. Instead, the grand jury remained in the courthouse into the evening hours to vote on a second indictment that was ultimately returned at 6:47 p.m. That highly unusual decision could have sent the message that the grand jurors would not be permitted to leave unless they returned a true bill. And if Ms. Halligan used words to suggest that message, it would further support the dismissing of the indictment. Even if Ms. Halligan did not expressly deliver that message, the coercive and rushed process that Ms. Halligan employed provides further reason to believe that the grand jury might have been provided with a materially incorrect factually or legal presentation to induce it to indict. It is also evident from the current record that Ms. Halligan's inexperience affected the grand jury proceedings. She erroneously signed the first indictment she presented, for which the grand jury failed to return a true bill. And I already went over how she did. It doesn't look like she actually did. It looked like they just attached the same signature page to both, which is another goof up, it would seem. And then created confusion by presenting 2 signed indictments to the presiding magistrate. Her own apparent confusion during the return proceedings support the inference, combined with the procedural errors in the return process and the factual errors in the indictment, that she failed to give basic instructions to the grand jury and to accurately answer their questions. Although such inexperience alone would not ordinarily satisfy the defense's burden for unsealing grand jury materials, that inexperience must be viewed alongside Ms. Halligan's likely motive to obtain an indictment to satisfy the president's demands. The inaccuracies in the indictment and the determination of every career prosecutor to consider the case that charges were not warranted. Taken together, the circumstances surrounding the return of this indictment establish sufficient reason to infer the possibility of prejudicial irregularities to justify disclosure of the materials. This is the type of conduct that would support dismissal. And because there is grave doubt whether the grand jury's decision was free from the substantial influence of that misconduct, the facts here clear the bar for disclosure of grand jury material. And then we have again the agent. Based on a review of the discovery materials produced by the government, it appears that the FBI special agent who testified before the grand jury may have been tainted by information covered by the attorney-client privilege. As noted above, the agent's name appears on the indictment return sheet and criminal case cover sheet, which we didn't see it. Maybe I don't see an agent's name here. I see Comey. I see counsel. Oh, there it is. I see it now. Miles Starr. There it is. Special Agent FBI Miles L. Starr. What happens if I Google his name? Do we know anything else about this guy? Miles L. Star. Copeland. FBI agent Miles Starr took lead in Comey case, and former FBI agent Jack Eckenrode came out of retirement to work as a special investigator. 18 years ago, Eckenrode was lead agent for Pat Fitzgerald, who's Comey's attorney, in the Scooter Libby case. FBI agent Miles Starr. See what else I can quickly find out about him. I'm going to put that in quotes. Comey criminal case cover sheet notices a summon is assigned to the case. I might dig down a little bit on this FBI agent. Maybe he's like super good. Maybe he's not. I wonder. Okay. The agent's role. Let's see. How did this attorney-client privilege even end up being somewhere where this could happen? Why it should have been dealt with before the indictment happened and separated and filtered out so that this would not happen. All right, anyway, the FBI agent who testified before the grand jury may have been tainted by information covered by attorney-client privilege. All right, typically reflects the name of the agent witness. The agent's role as a witness raises serious concerns about the misuse of privileged information in the grand jury. The same day the agent apparently testified before the grand jury, he alerted the Office of General Counsel at the FBI that redacted. That information apparently related to certain attorneys for Mr. Comey, including Mr. Richmond. Nevertheless, the agent testified before the grand jury that same day, and given the content of the resulting indictment, it is clear that his testimony must have referenced Mr. Comey's interactions and communications with Mr. Richmond. This created a high risk that privileged information was presented to the grand jury by a tainted case agent. Well, I think it strongly indicates that, doesn't it? Indeed, OGC's subsequent guidance on September 29th confirmed as much. OGC directed that any member of the team redacted. The natural corollary of this guidance would be to similarly preclude any potentially exposed team members from presenting evidence to the grand jury. So it sounds like the guidance from OGC was anybody who saw that attorney-client privilege stuff, pull them off. Pull them off the Comey case. If OGC was concerned that mere participation, redacted, might taint subsequent process, it follows that a tainted agent's testimony before the grand jury would present a similar, if not greater, risk of tainting the presentation of evidence with privileged information. Because it appears the agent nevertheless testified before the grand jury on September 25th, 2025, there is reason to believe that his testimony may have been tainted by privileged information he reviewed between Mr. Comey and his attorneys, including Mr. Richmond. Thus, disclosure of grand jury materials is warranted so that the defense can determine whether the government is using privileged information to build its case. If it is, the defense will argue that the court should take appropriate remedial steps to prevent use of the potentially privileged information. All right. So you know what? Do you know what happened? Well, before I tell you what happened, because there was a hearing on this issue today, this morning, while I've been recording, a hearing occurred on this matter and I know what happened. And by now you probably do too. But before I tell you and go over it, just going to remind you, my link tree is in the description of the show. It's also in my profile. Please make sure you're following me in all these places. You find a good way to watch the show, which, I mean, I assume you already have. Here are all the ways to listen to the show. And if you like what I do here and you want to keep me doing it, consider supporting the show. Purchases at Benson Honey Farms using my affiliate link, or at Bootleg Products, or at Manly Cans, you get something and they kick a few dollars my way out of your purchase. Or if you just want to buy me a cup of coffee at ko-fi.com, that's awesome. Or if you want to commit to supporting me once a month, a paid subscription at justhuman.substack.com is a great way to do it. $7 a month. You're basically buying me one cup of coffee per month, and you're contributing a couple dollars to the Pacer Fund so that I can buy more court documents and present them to you. Thank you to everybody who supports me. And hey, if you're like, hey, you want to support me, but you can't afford to contribute, totally understand. Just like and comment. Like, commenting, and sharing the show wherever you're listening or watching is what puts it into the algorithm and helps new listeners discover my show. And I've been recently added back on YouTube. I've been active over there, and I've gotten over 500 subscribers now, on my way to 1,000, I hope, very soon. And over on YouTube, it really, really, really helps if you like and comment. It really helps my stuff get bigger reach in the huge world that YouTube is. So thank you to everybody who does that. Even if you just comment here, or love the show, or good job, or you suck, Comey's a dirty cop, whatever you comment, it doesn't matter. It helps. So shout out to all my haters and all my friends. Okay. So Comey won. The judge heard, they had a hearing this morning on the motion for the grand jury material and on the filter protocol. And the judge concurred with Comey. And I did this short thread linking my previous threads to it. And I want to go right here to the article. We don't have the order on the docket last I checked. Let me make one more check of it. Here it is. No, it's not. Nope, it's not there yet. It's not on the docket yet. Okay. A federal judge on Wednesday ordered prosecutors to turn over key evidence in the criminal case against former FBI Director Comey. And the judge said that the Justice Department may have indicted first and investigated later. Magistrate Judge William Fitzpatrick directed prosecutors to provide by Thursday evening, grand jury materials and other evidence seized during the years-long investigation. The order came after Comey's attorneys argued that they were at a disadvantage because they had not reviewed evidence collected years ago. Comey, who attended the hearing, did not speak, is charged with lying to Congress in 2020, blah, 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 blah. In court filings earlier this week, the Justice Department defended Trump's public comments, arguing that his call for prosecution reflected a legitimate prosecutorial motive. At the center of the dispute are materials obtained from Daniel Richman, a Columbia University law professor and longtime Comey confidant. Investigators executed search warrants on Richman's devices in 2019 and 2020. Prosecutors allege Comey authorized Richman to serve as a special government employee at the FBI, to share information with reporters, and later lied to Congress by denying that he had allowed anyone to act as an anonymous source. Comey's defense team says his congressional testimony referred specifically to Andrew McCabe, not Richman. Comey's lawyer said they have never reviewed the seized communications and therefore cannot determine whether any of the material is privileged. Fitzpatrick ordered prosecutors to immediately correct that. Quote, "We're going to fix that, and we're going to fix that today," he said from the bench. The indictment was issued shortly after Trump took office, blah, blah, blah. So this motion that I just read to you was successful. Comey got it. And maybe now we'll get to see. Maybe some of that is going to come out and we're going to be able to review some of that, and it's going to enlighten us on some of these things. One more thing I should mention is that this order on Halligan's appointment, which we're going to go over in the next segment. This is the exhibit on the next segment. But AG Bondi stepped up and said, hey, I've reviewed the grand jury proceedings in United States v. Comey and United States v. James, and I hereby exercise the authority vested in the Attorney General by law to ratify Ms. Halligan's actions before the grand jury and her signature on the indictments returned in each case. So, Pam Bondi has stepped in to reinforce the indictment against Comey and Letitia James for what it's worth, which I don't know. I've never seen an AG do that. I've never seen an AG do that. So I don't know exactly how that works, but it might give. I guess it could mean that if a judge orders a dismissal based on some irregularity with the grand jury proceedings, the AG might come in and, DOJ is going to step in and appeal that dismissal. So, okay, next we're going to go to DOJ's filing in support of Lindsay Halligan's appointment, which is going to be a long read, but I think it's well worth it. It basically solves, or it's completely changed my mind, as I've said before. So that's next. All right, next filing. This one is, I need to set this one up just a little bit. I already made a shorter video on this filing where I went over it in brief using my thread that I wrote on X. But I introduced some of the background information on it in that shorter video. And here for this page by page read of the filing, I'm also going to do a little bit of background just real quick on it because it's different from the other filings. It's a different circumstances of it. So both Letitia James and James Comey, as you probably know if you're following this case, have filed motions to dismiss for the unlawful appointment of Lindsay Halligan to the attorney's office for the Eastern District of Virginia. And because it deals with a dismissal of the attorney who brought the case, the district judge who's handling those cases, both James and Comey, has assigned the handling of this issue to a separate judge who's out of district, and that's Judge Cameron McGowan Curry. He's a senior judge out of South Carolina. So he specifically is handling the matter of Lindsay Halligan's appointment. And she is as far as I know, I'm pretty sure she's the fourth U.S. attorney that was given an interim appointment by the Trump admin who has had her appointment challenged in court. And the other three, it's Alina Habba, New Jersey. I think his name's Asali or S-I-L in Southern California. And then there's another guy. His name starts with the letter C. It's like Chada or something. He's in Nevada. All of them have been, it's all been decided against them to some extent. Either full removal or partial removal, like a judge said, no, you're ineligible to be the actual or fulfill the role of the lead attorney in that office. But they've all been given special attorney status by the AG, which means they still retain the power to conduct legal proceedings, but they're not the head of that attorney's office. And so I'm expecting the same thing might happen here. And it's just a really weird thing. And when I read to you guys in fact, since this appointment was challenged, I've said that I think it's compelling to the motions to dismiss Alina Habba, or dismiss the case based on dismiss the case based on the unlawful appointment of Lindsay Halligan. I have found that motion that Comey's team filed compelling, and I've compared it to the motion to dismiss Jack Smith's case against Trump for unlawful appointment as special counsel, even though it's not perfectly analogous. and I've gone through and looked at the motions that got Lena Haba challenged her appointment, and I find them compelling. However, I promised you guys that just like I'm giving a fair shake to the filings from Comey's team, that as DOJ responds and prosecutors respond to those filings, I'm going to give theirs a fair shake. I'm really trying to be as fair to each side as I can. It doesn't mean I'm not biased. I have my own biases just like you have your own biases. We all do. And it's kind of silly to ignore those and pretend that those biases don't affect us in some way. What we can try to do is at least give a fair shake to each filing in the case and try and appreciate and see things from that side. And I've already read this motion. I've already done a thread on it, and I find it very compelling. And I'm going to tell you right here at the beginning, it has changed my mind. It's had to sit with me for about 24 hours, but it's changed my mind. And I love that. So in other words, I was wrong. I said I'm giving you all this right here before I read the filing. I said a while back that I thought, I was speculating, I was hypothesizing that the appointment of Lindsay Halligan was kind of a kill switch to the James Comey case and also to other cases in the district. And I didn't really see a way around it. And I thought she probably would be taken out of that position. And I think it still could happen. That doesn't mean it's right, though. Doesn't mean it's lawful. That it's correctly decided for that to happen. And I believe I was wrong about it being a kill switch to the case. In fact, I guess I should say I now trust, or I now have shifted to thinking, yep, that was incorrect because of this filing and because of a new order from AG Pam Bondi, which gives Lindsay Halligan more power and endorses the indictments of James Comey and Letitia James as being approved by AG Bondi. So I don't think they're going to be getting dismissed. And for those of you who really wish to see the case against Comey and the case against James actually get them, whatever that means to you, you can be encouraged by that. So this filing I think it's a good read. This is the kind of filing I really enjoy reading. And those of you who are document nerds like me and like this stuff, I think you will enjoy it too. So after that 5-minute introduction to it, let's get after it. If you hear some clicking back behind me, I don't know if my mic is picking it up. It probably isn't, but both my dogs are here with me. They just had dinner. And after dinner, they like to chew on their bones for a while before they fall asleep. But that's what's going on. Okay. So this is a filing that it's consolidated from both U.S. attorneys that are prosecuting the cases, their respective cases. So it's signed by Lindsay Halligan, but also Henry Whitaker from the counselor to the AG. And it's signed by Lemons and Diaz, who are from the office of North Carolina, who's prosecuting James Comey, and then Roger Keller, who's out of Missouri, who's prosecuting Letitia James. There are no prosecutors from the Eastern District of Virginia on the case. It's very strange. Okay. The United States files. This is not prosecutors from the Eastern District of Virginia or the government. This is the United States because Whitaker is the counselor to the AG, and he is filing this on behalf of the United States. Another unusual thing about this filing. The United States files this opposition to the motions by defendants James B. Comey Jr. and Letitia A. James to dismiss their respective indictments on the theory that interim U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan was improperly appointed. Because defendants' arguments overlap substantially, and this court has consolidated the motions for argument, the government files this consolidated response to both motions. The government will respond separately to Comey's motion to dismiss this indictment, or his indictment, on vindictive and selective prosecution grounds, which remains pending before Judge Nachmanoff. By the way, that motion is the one you're seeing Comey's handwritten notes coming from, that there are exhibits that were filed alongside it. I'm going to get to that as my next video. And I'll do, just like I've done with this, I'll do a kind of shorter video on it, and then I'll do a page by page read of that document, or that filing. It's quite interesting. And I think that's probably the one everybody is wanting me to get to, but I'm trying to go in order of the docket so that I can just keep pace with it. And I just like going in order. All right, introduction. Although defendants frame their arguments in constitutional terms, all agree that U.S. attorneys are inferior officers whose appointments the Constitution permits Congress to vest, quote, by law and in a head of department like the Attorney General. U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. All further agree that Congress in 28 U.S.C. 546 did in fact vest the Attorney General with the power to appoint U.S. attorneys for at least 120 days. So, the sole question is whether Section 546 authorized the Attorney General to appoint interim U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan in the circumstances here, where a previous interim U.S. Attorney vacated office after serving 120 days and being reappointed by the district court. Section 546's text applies a straightforward answer: yes. Under Section 546A, quote, except as provided in subsection B, the Attorney General may appoint a United States Attorney for the district in which the office of United States Attorney is vacant. By its plain terms, that power is subject to one and only one exception: subsection B, which bars appointing individuals to whom the Senate refused advice and consent. All agree that the office of U.S. Attorney for this district was vacant when Ms. Halligan was appointed, and no one claims that subsection B applies since the Senate has not yet acted on Ms. Halligan's nomination. Because Section 546A's plain text is satisfied, Ms. Halligan's appointment is valid. Defendants claim that other portions of 546 impliedly prevent the Attorney General from appointing an interim U.S. Attorney 120 days after her first interim appointment. But Section 546 says no such thing. Section 546C2 permits a person appointed under Section 546 to serve until the expiration of 120 days after appointment by the Attorney General and under this section. Thus, each appointment under Section 546 may not exceed 120 days. The Attorney General must revisit her choice periodically, consistent with the nature of interim appointments. Defendants instead read Section 546C2 to impose an aggregate 120-day limit as if an appointment expired 120 days after the initial appointment by the Attorney General. But that is not the statute that Congress wrote. Defendants also invoke Section 546D, which provides that after, quote, an appointment expires, under Section C2, the district court for such a district may appoint a United States Attorney to serve until the vacancy is filled. By its terms, that provision offers a parallel track to the Attorney General's appointments under Section 546A, ensuring that the office of U.S. Attorney is promptly filled. Defendants, however, read Section 546D as if it said that, quote, the only district court may appoint a United States Attorney after 120 days. But again, Congress made a different choice, and defendants seek to rewrite the statute based on misplaced policy concerns. Just to clarify for you guys, what he's saying is that defendants are arguing, Comey's team is arguing, as if Section 546 makes it so the Attorney General gets one interim U.S. Attorney appointment for 120 days, and then after that, only the district court can appoint a United States Attorney as they wait for Congress or the Senate to approve the president's nominated attorney to that office. Even were Ms. Halligan's appointment invalid, the motions to dismiss should be denied. While defendants challenge Ms. Halligan's appointment as interim U.S. Attorney, the actions they challenge do not hinge on her validly holding that particular office. Any government attorney can present a case to a grand jury or sign an indictment, and the Attorney General plainly possessed and exercised the authority to make Ms. Halligan a government attorney, as the Attorney General has now confirmed. See Exhibit A, And at this point, we're going to go and look at Exhibit A. This is a new order signed on Halloween, October 31st, dated right there, October 31st, 2025, signed by Pam Bondi. And I have never read anything like it. I'm not saying there's never been anything like it. I'm just saying I've never read anything like it. It's quite an extraordinary order, and you're about to find out what I mean. Order 6485-2025, okay? Appointment of Lindsay Halligan as special attorney to conduct legal proceedings in the Eastern District of Virginia and ratification of certain actions in that district. On September 22nd, 2025, I, Pam Bondi, exercised the authority vested in the Attorney General by 28 U.S.C. 546, the section we're talking about in the filing, to designate and appoint Lindsay Halligan as the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. For the avoidance of doubt as to the validity of that appointment, and by virtue of the authority vested in the Attorney General by law, including 28 U.S.C. 509, 510, and 515, you might remember those statutes from the special counsel's appointment orders, I hereby appoint Ms. Halligan to the additional position of special attorney as of September 22nd, 2025. I don't know any other way to read that, guys, than as this is a retroactive appointment to special attorney, and thereby ratify her employment as an attorney of the Department of Justice from that date going forward. As a special attorney, Ms. Halligan has the authority to conduct in the Eastern District of Virginia any kind of legal proceeding, civil or criminal, including grand jury proceedings and proceedings before United States magistrates and judges. In the alternative, should a court conclude that Ms. Halligan's authority as special attorney is limited in particular matters, I hereby delegate to Ms. Halligan the authority as special attorney to conduct and supervise the prosecutions in United States v. Comey and United States v. James. In addition, based on my review of the grand jury proceedings in United States v. Comey and United States v. James, I hereby exercise the authority vested in the Attorney General by law, including 28 U.S.C. 509, 510, and 518b, to ratify Ms. Halligan's actions before the grand jury and her signature on the indictments returned by the grand jury in each case. Whoa. So Lindsay Halligan is the interim U.S. attorney for the EDVA. She is a special attorney for the EDVA, retroactive to September 22nd, 3 days before the Comey indictment. And she is a special attorney of DOJ with specific authorization to operate in the EDVA. And she is a special attorney in the employ of the EDVA with the power and assignment of conducting and supervising the prosecutions of James Comey and Letitia James. And AG Bondi has personally reviewed the grand jury proceedings that led to those two indictments, and she hereby ratifies them. This is an AG backing up a interim U.S. attorney and now a special attorney, and endorsing the indictments that attorney is assigned to prosecute. So I don't think, based on that, guys, I don't think there's any chance, or I just don't think that United States v. Comey or United States v. James is going to be dismissed based on anything that has to do with the appointment of Lindsay Halligan. And it's probably not going to be dismissed based on anything that happened in the grand jury. Quite an extraordinary order. Imagine if A.G. Garland had done that for Jack Smith. Y'all probably don't want to. We don't want to imagine that. Okay. Moreover, Any defect in Miss Halligan's role does not taint the indictment themselves. She at least was a de facto officer, and any error was harmless since the Attorney General indisputably could have appointed her in a different capacity to obtain the indictments. In all events, the government has endorsed the prosecutions, and the Attorney General has personally ratified the indictments to obviate any question as to their validity. At minimum, any dismissal should be without prejudice to permit the government to seek new indictments now that the Attorney General has cured any arguable flaw in Ms. Halligan's authority to prosecute. Background. I'm not sure I need to read the background. I'm going to do it. Legal background. Quote, investigative and prosecutorial decision-making is the special province of the executive branch, and the Constitution vests the entirety of the executive power in the president. That's Article 2, Section 1. The Attorney General is the head of the Justice Department and acts as the president's chief law enforcement officer. And U.S. attorneys appointed for each federal district act as chief federal law enforcement officials for the judicial district they serve. Congress has provided for the appointment of U.S. attorneys for 4-year terms by the president with the advice and consent of the Senate. But because U.S. attorneys are considered inferior officers, subject to the control of the Attorney General and ultimately the President, see Myers v. United States 1926, Congress may also by law vest the power to appoint U.S. attorneys in the President alone, in the courts of law, or in the heads of departments like the Attorney General. U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. In the absence of a Senate-confirmed U.S. attorney, Congress has authorized numerous fallback means for the duties of the office to be exercised. The Federal Vacancies Reform Act, for instance, allows certain individuals to temporarily perform the duties of offices requiring Senate confirmation, like U.S. attorney. In addition, Congress has vested the Attorney General with all functions of Department of Justice officers and employees, including U.S. attorneys, plus the general authority to conduct and supervise litigation on behalf of the United States, 28 U.S.C. 509, 516 to 519, and allowed attorney generals to delegate those powers to any Department of Justice officer or employee. That's Section 510. The Attorney General may appoint attorneys to conduct any kind of legal proceeding, civil or criminal, including grand jury proceedings, which United States attorneys are authorized by law to conduct. The Attorney General may retain its special assistants, special attorneys, and she may appoint officials to detect and prosecute crimes against the United States. Congress also has authorized the appointment of U.S. attorneys on an interim basis under 28 U.S.C. 546. Section 546A supplies the top-line grant of authority. Quote, except as provided in subsection B, the Attorney General may appoint a United States attorney for the district in which the office of United States Attorney is vacant. Section 546B provides a single exception. Quote, the Attorney General shall not appoint as United States Attorney a person to whose appointment by the President to that office the Senate refused to give advice and consent. Section 546C provides a time limit on the interim appointment. Quote, a person appointed as United States Attorney under this section may serve until the earlier of 1, the qualification of a United States Attorney for such district appointment by the President under Section 546 of this 1 title, which is a Senate confirmation. So point 1 is the person can serve until the Senate confirms a U.S. attorney, or 2, the expiration of 120 days after the appointment by the Attorney General. And Section 546D provides yet another fallback option, ensuring that when the Attorney General fails to act, there will be someone to exercise the powers of U.S. attorney. Quote, if an appointment expires under subsection C2, the district court for such district may appoint a United States attorney to serve until the vacancy is filled, regardless of how she was appointed. Each United States attorney is subject to removal by the president. Factual background. On January 20th, 2025, the incumbent U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia resigned. The next day, the acting Attorney General appointed Eric Siebert as interim U.S. Attorney under Section 546A. Mr. Siebert's initial appointment expired 120 days later on May 21st, 2025, and the judges of the Eastern District reappointed him under Section 546D. On September 19th, 2025, Mr. Siebert vacated the office of U.S. Attorney. The next day, the president announced his intention to nominate Lindsay Halligan as U.S. Attorney with the Senate's advice and consent under 28 U.S.C. 541A. To lead the office in the interim, on September 22nd, the Attorney General named Ms. Halligan as interim U.S. Attorney under Section 546A. The Senate received Ms. Halligan's nomination on September 30th, and they still have it. After Ms. Halligan's appointment as interim U.S. Attorney, on September 25th, 2025, a grand jury in the Eastern District returned a 2-count indictment charging Comey with making false statements to Congress in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1001A2 and obstruction of a congressional proceeding in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1505. On October 9th, a grand jury returned an indictment charging James with bank fraud in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1344 and making false statements to a financial institution in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1014. For each indictment, the only government attorney who signed was Ms. Halligan. Argument. Ms. Halligan is validly serving as interim U.S. Attorney under 28 U.S.C. 546. Section 546A states, except as provided in subsection B, the Attorney General may appoint a United States Attorney for the district in which the office of United States Attorney is vacant. Subsection B, in turn, prohibits the Attorney General from appointing someone whose appointment by the President to that office the Senate refused to give advice and consent. Those criteria are plainly met here. The office of United States Attorney for the Eastern District became vacant upon Mr. Siebert's September 19th departure, and the Senate has not refused advice and consent to Ms. Halligan. Her nomination remains pending. The Attorney General therefore lawfully appointed Ms. Halligan as interim U.S. Attorney under Section 546 and the Appointments Clause, and the motions to dismiss should be denied. These cases are simple. Defendants, however, contend that Section 546C and D together implicitly, quote, limit the total tenure of the Attorney General's interim appointment to 120 days, after which only court-appointed interim U.S. attorneys are allowed. But Section 546 imposes only one exception to the Attorney General's appointment authority. Section 546B bars an appointment to whom the Senate has refused advice and consent. Because Congress provided an exception in the statute, courts do not have authority to create others. See United States v. Johnson, 2000. Defendants principally rely on Section 546C, which states that, quote, a person appointed as United States Attorney under this section may serve until the qualification of a Senate-confirmed U.S. Attorney or the expiration of 120 days after the appointment by an Attorney General under this section. Ms. Halligan's appointment fully complies with that provision. She is a person appointed as a United States Attorney under this section. The Senate has not yet confirmed her or any other nominee as U.S. Attorney, and Ms. Halligan has not served 120 days after the appointment by the Attorney General under this section. Nothing in the text explicitly or implicitly precludes the Attorney General from making additional appointments under Section 546A after 120 days if a new vacancy arises. Again, subsection A identifies only one exception to the Attorney General's appointment authority, subsection B, not subsection C. If anything, Section 546C expressly contemplates that the Attorney General may make multiple interim appointments by referring to a person appointed as United States Attorney under this section rather than the person appointed. Defendants recognize as much, but claim that the Attorney General must cram multiple appointments into a single 120-day period. But the far more natural reading is that each appointment triggers its own 120-day clock. Each person appointed may serve until 120 days after the appointment. That's what it says. That reading does not render the 120-day limit meaningless. The Attorney General must revisit her interim appointments every 120 days. They do not automatically renew. That process provides political accountability, ensuring that an appointee without Senate confirmation cannot serve indefinitely without frequent personal review by the Attorney General. At the same time, Congress did not hamstring the Attorney General with an artificial, one-time only appointment window. That reading also tracks the ordinary presumption that, quote, when a statute provides for an appointee to serve a term of years, the specified time of service begins with the appointment. For example, if a Senate-confirmed U.S. attorney resigns before the end of his 4-year term, 28 U.S.C. 541b, a new Senate-confirmed U.S. attorney is entitled to his own 4-year term, not the remaining days of his predecessor's term. Likewise, each new interim appointment triggers a new 120-day clock under Section 546c2, avoiding the instability of artificially limited appointments in the waning days of the initial 120-day period. Recent Fourth Circuit precedent supports the same conclusion. In Salmongayan versus Garland, 2024, the circuit addressed a regulation The circuit addressed a regulation authorizing the appointment of temporary Board of Immigration Appeals members for terms not to exceed 6 months. An alien challenged the Attorney General's reappointment of a temporary board member to 4 successive 6-month terms. The court rejected that challenge, recognizing that the regulation's language doesn't restrict the power to appoint the same person to multiple consecutive terms. So successive terms are permissible. As the Eighth Circuit added in rejecting a similar argument, implying a limitation on successive appointments, quote, would be inconsistent with the Attorney General's broad power to make appointments and delegate duties to his subordinates. See Rivera v. Garland, 2024. Likewise, nothing in Section 546C's text limits the Attorney General's authority to make successive interim U.S. attorney appointments, meaning that the Attorney General's ordinary broad authority to appoint subordinates and delegate her prosecutorial powers applies. Defendants, their contrary approach, reads Section 546C2 as if it said that interim appointments last until the expiration of 120 days after the initial appointment by the Attorney General under this section. That reading violates the basic interpretive rule that courts may not add words to the statute Congress enacted. Muldrow versus City of St. Louis, 2024. Section 546C2's clock on interim service by a person appointed runs from appointment, not the initial appointment of someone else. Defendants' more specific justifications for the 120 days and done approach are equally untenable. First, defendants claim that had Congress wanted each appointment to last up to 120 days, Congress would have made appointments expire 120 days after that appointment or after his or her appointment, rather than 120 days after appointment. But the appointment to which Congress naturally referred in subsection C2 is the same appointment that Congress has been discussing throughout Section 546. Subsection A allows the Attorney General to, quote, appoint a United States attorney, who is referred to again in subsection C as a person appointed. Congress presumptively uses terms, even with variations, quote, in one consistent sense in neighboring provisions. The unadorned word appointment logically refers to the appointment of the person appointed. That inference is particularly apt here, given that all agree meaning Comey and James, that the Attorney General may appoint multiple interim U.S. attorneys, so the reader must infer which appointment Congress was referring to. In context, the obvious referent is the appointment of the person appointed that Congress has been discussing, not the initial appointment of someone else. I hope that all made sense to you. This is in the weeds textual stuff. the meaning of each word, but it matters. All right, second, Comey contends that the government's reading renders superfluous the phrase under this statute in subsection C2's tying of the 120-day clock to appointment by Attorney General under this section. But under this statute, that phrase serves at least two functions. To begin, it draws a contrast with subsection C1's discussion of someone appointed by the president under section 541 of this title, reorienting the reader that subsection C2 is discussing an Attorney General appointment under section 546. Furthermore, it clarifies that the 120-day limit governs appointments only under section 546, not the many other authorities for individuals to perform the duties of U.S. attorneys temporarily. In any event, Comey's reading adds no additional meaning to under this section. He reads, quote, after appointment by the Attorney General to mean after the initial appointment by the Attorney General. Reading Congress's subsequent inclusion of under this section to refer more broadly to any appointment under this section. Comey does not support amending the statute in the way defendants ask. Third, Comey asserts that the limit in subsection C1 that an interim U.S. attorney may not serve once the Senate confirms the president's nominee under section 541 is not appointee specific. So C2 should not be read as appointee specific, absent clear language to that effect. But subsection C2 is perfectly clear. It uses appointment to refer to the person appointed as United States Attorney under this section. Regardless, subsection C1 does not address a specific appointee because it sets out a condition that does not return on the status of any interim appointment. Once the Senate confirms a U.S. attorney, the interim office holder is out, regardless of how long she served or who appointed her, whether it was the court or the AG. Subsection C2, by contrast, addresses when an interim appointment expires and thus logically turns on the appointment at issue. Defendant's reading also contradicts section 546's statutory history. All right. What we just read was a lot of legalese. I know that. And it was a dissection of section 546 and the meaning of each word and what appointment they're talking about and all that. And it's kind of hard to follow. This next section is not hard to follow. And this next section begins the part of this filing that this earlier section already was changing my mind, but this is what really put it over the line for me is the next following section, okay? Defendant's reading also contradicts section 546's statutory history. As defendants recognize, between 1986 and 2006, section 546 was identical to the current version. During that period, the government repeatedly used successive 120-day appointments for interim U.S. attorneys. In 1987, the Attorney General reappointed an interim U.S. attorney after the initial 120-day clock had run, an appointment that was challenged in court and upheld. That was in reply to grand jury proceedings 1987. The Congressional Research Service reports that between 1993, January 1993, and March 9th, 2006, at least 8 U.S. attorney vacancies, 3 under the Clinton administration and 5 under the Bush administration, were filled through successive 120-day appointments by the Attorney General under the provision of 28 U.S.C. 546. In debating later amendments to Section 546, Senator Kyle identified two pre-2006 instances when interim U.S. attorneys served 3 or even 4 successive 120-day terms. As far as the government is aware, the only district court to consider the practice contemporaneously approved it. And until the current administration, no court questioned it. And that would be Alina Habba. It was with the appointment of Alina Habba and this right here, United States v. Giroud, which is a case that was brought in New Jersey, and they successfully challenged the appointment of Habba, and it's now at the 3rd District Court of Appeals right now, I believe. That case is. But until this Trump admin and this year, no court had questioned that the Attorney General had the power to appoint interim U.S. attorneys to an office back to back to back. And that kind of tells the whole tale. This is being used as a way to combat these indictments because it's Trump, not because it's unlawful in some way to do successive back-to-back 120-day interim appointments. It's a legal challenge based on a flawed reading of Section 546, a funny reading of it that is sometimes working with a few judges. And it's because of Trump. It's because of who's in the White House, not because of a problem with the appointment or because it's some new thing that U.S. attorneys are getting back-to-back 120-day interim appointments. It's not new. And it's never been questioned until Trump. In 2006, Congress amended Section 546 to eliminate the district court's appointment power and permit the Attorney General appointee to serve indefinitely. This happened in 2006, and they removed all that, and it's like, okay, the interim appointment is going to be there until there's a Senate appointment. There's no 120-day limit, and the district court isn't going to be voting on whether or not that person remains or somebody else comes in. I remember this. Those of you who are political junkies who were following politics then, you probably remember it too. That there was a bloodbath in the DOJ as Bush conducted a midnight massacre, firing all of these U.S. attorneys, right? All right. But following controversy over the Bush administration's firings of U.S. attorneys in 2007, Congress restored the previous language that was still well understood, to authorize successive appointments. Where Congress has chosen to maintain the relevant provisions and here affirmatively reenacted them against decades of executive branch practice, Congress should be understood to have implicitly ratified that practice. So they put it back in and said, nope, 120-day appointments are back in. And like we read earlier in this, what does that force the AG to do? It forces the AG, who works for the president, to go back and reappoint them every 120 days, which serves as a check on that office and on that U.S. attorney. Citing legislative history, defendants, Comey and James, assert that the purpose of the 2007 amendment was to prevent successive interim appointments. And defendants' legislative history reflects the proverbial, quote, looking over a crowd and picking out your friends. I love that. That's a new phrase to me, and I love it. I love it. I also feel called out by it. I think we all can feel called out about this. I've never heard this before. I don't know how I've missed it, but I've never heard that expression, and I think it's brilliant. While some members certainly wanted to prohibit successive appointments, Senator Kyle correctly pointed out that, quote, because the bill reinstates the exact language that existed before the statute was amended in 2006, the Attorney General could make 120-day appointments of interim U.S. attorneys. Congress was thus, quote, aware that even upon a return to the previous version of Section 546, the Attorney General could rely on pre-existing legal rationales to make successive interim appointments. So Congress took that out in 2007 and said, nope, the Attorney General can make an appointment, and then that person is just there until there's a Senate-confirmed U.S. attorney to take over. No need to do this 120-day business, and no need for the district court to vote on who gets to be there. Instead, the AG puts someone there, and that person remains until a Senate-confirmed person takes over. But then there was a bunch of firings, and people got all upset. They're like, no. Let's go back to the way it was. And they reverted 546 back to the way it was, which means Congress, by re-implementing it, they're ratifying that version of it. And what did that version of Section 546 allow for? Consecutive 120-day appointments of interim U.S. attorneys, back to back to back. Furthermore, back in the filing, and the Senate rejected an amendment that would have repealed the Attorney General's interim appointment authority altogether. There was an amendment for that, and the Senate took it out. If Congress had intended to block successive appointments in 2007, as defendants claim in their filings, returning to the former text that had long been understood to authorize such appointments would have been a bizarre way of doing so. Instead, the 2007 amendment means what it says. The Attorney General can no longer make single indefinite appointments under Section 546 as she could under the 2006 version. She must revisit her choice every 120 days. And courts may once again appoint interim U.S. attorneys as a backstop. That amendment marks a significant change from the 2006 version. In reenacting the 2006 text, the pre-2006 text, Congress presumptively ratified the executive's long-standing use of successive 120-day appointments under that version of the statute. Defendants also placed significant weight on a 1986 memorandum by then Deputy Assistant Attorney General Alito, identifying a purported, quote, congressional purpose that after the expiration of a 120-day period, further interim appointments are to be made by the court. But, consistent with the era in which it was written, the extent of the memorandum's analysis is a citation of a single House floor statement. And the cited statement does not even suggest that the Attorney General cannot make multiple appointments that total over 120 days. The congressman who Alito was referring to in that had merely said that once an interim appointment expires, the district court appoints a United States attorney. The government cannot let 120-day appointment lapse, but multiple shorter appointments may be allowed. In any event, the memorandum left open whether the Attorney General could make an additional appointment if the district court failed to act, refuting Comey's claim that the memorandum took precisely the same approach that he takes here. So I'm not saying it's nefarious, but they cherry-picked that Alito memo. And I'm going to say I fell for it. When I saw that, I was like, ooh, that's compelling. Alito said that back in the 80s. That's compelling. That's what I thought. Fooled me. Fooled me, guys. Putting my hand up and saying it right now. Fooled me. All right. And subsequent Department of Justice practice rebuts any suggestion that the Attorney General is limited to a single 120-day period, with the first of many successive interim appointments made less than 10 months after the memorandum was issued. Defendants also divine their implied limitation from Section 546D, which provides that, quote, if an appointment expires under Section C2, the district court for such district may appoint a United States attorney to serve until the vacancy is filled. Here, Mr. Siebert's initial appointment expired on May 21st, and the judges of the Eastern District appointed him to a new indefinite term subject to presidential removal. Yet, Mr. Siebert then vacated his office on September 19th, and nothing in subsection D, explicitly or implicitly, limited the Attorney General's authority to appoint an interim U.S. attorney under subsection A to fill the vacancy. Again, the only limitation in section A is that it applies, quote, except as provided in subsection B. Defendant's reading impermissibly treats subsection D as an additional unstated restriction. Section 546D's text further refutes defendant's reading. Subsection D says that, quote, the district court for such district may appoint a United States attorney once a 120-day appointment has expired, not that only the district court may appoint. Subsection D thus provides a parallel grant of authority. It does not displace subsection A. Comey claims otherwise, based on Shady Grove Orthopedic Associates versus Allstate Insurance in 2010, a case about whether the federal rules of criminal procedure, or civil procedure, I should say, displaced a state law class action limit. But when it comes to the federal government's powers, it is common for Congress to grant parallel authority. Parallel tracks are especially common in the appointments context to ensure the continuity of government and provide the executive branch with flexibility to implement its priorities with its preferred personnel. For example, 28 U.S.C. 508B allows the Attorney General to designate certain subordinates to serve as acting attorney generals during a future vacancy, while the FVRA authorizes the president to select different people to temporarily perform Senate-confirmed offices, including Attorney General. Those two authorities, the Fourth Circuit has held, are alternatives, not mutually exclusive. Likewise, defendants accept the Attorney General may make at least 120 days worth of interim U.S. attorney appointments, even though the FVRA says that, quote, the first assistant shall perform the functions and duties of the office temporarily during vacancy. Section 546A and D similarly provide parallel authority to ensure that the office of U.S. Attorney does not stay vacant if the Attorney General neglects to make a successive appointment. As Comey recognizes, quote, the importance of the office mandates a mechanism for ensuring that it will function on an interim basis when no Senate-confirmed occupant serves. Nor are defendants correct that concurrent authorities would produce an intractable conflict or thorny separation of powers issues, or questions, I should say. If both the Attorney General and the court attempt to make an appointment, the president can remove the court's appointee to ensure that the Attorney General's choice prevails. The same would be true if the Attorney General attempted to designate one successor under 28 U.S.C. 508B and the president preferred someone else under FVRA. Under our Constitution, the executive power, all of it, is vested in a president. To the extent there is a dispute over whether a district court or the president should decide who gets to wield executive power, the Constitution provides a clear answer: the president. In any event, no such conflict exists here. The district court did not appoint anyone in the days following Mr. Siebert's departure. At bottom, defendants' arguments sound in policy, not text. If the Attorney General could string together 120-day appointments, they claim the executive branch could circumvent both the district court's role under subsection D and Senate confirmation under section 541. But even the most formidable policy arguments cannot overcome a clear statutory directive, and defendants' concerns ring hollow given that the government previously let the district court make an appointment and has now submitted Ms. Halligan for Senate confirmation and secured confirmation of 16 U.S. attorneys mere weeks ago. Defendants' policy argument also assumes that the conclusion that subsection D seeks to make to the court, not the Attorney General, the sole appointer of interim U.S. attorneys after 120 days. Instead, as explained above, subsection D simply offers a fail-safe should the Attorney General not make an appointment. Regardless, defendant's own reading does not guarantee district court appointments, since if the government uses the FVRA instead of Section 546A, the district court's authority is never triggered. Likewise, because subsection D is triggered only when an appointment expires under subsection C2, the district court cannot appoint if the Attorney General's appointee vacates office before expiration of the appointment after 120 days. And even if Alito's memorandum, on which defendants rely, contemplates that the Attorney General might make successive appointments if the district court fails to act, a conclusion that makes sense lest a slow-moving district court stymie prosecutorial power, permitting the Attorney General to make an appointment or additional interim U.S. attorneys is not circumventing or sidelining anyone. It's allowing the statute's parallel authorities to work. Defendants' concern over bypassing Senate confirmation are particularly puzzling, given that, even on their reading, court-appointed interim U.S. attorneys can serve indefinitely. Historically, district courts have overwhelmingly reappointed the Attorney General's choice, as happened with Siebert and multiple other U.S. attorneys in the Fourth Circuit this year. In practice, defendants would frequently allow the president's pick to serve an entire 4-year term or longer without Senate confirmation or even periodic reassessment. This part really changed my mind and really cemented things, because the district courts historically reappointing the interim picked by the AG shows that this idea that Comey and James used in their filing, this idea that it was going to create a separation of powers issue and it was going to, it would just mess things up, isn't a thing. If it was a thing, it would have developed before now. There is a reason, however, and this is another part of this that I really like and found compelling. And I found it interesting because I never thought about this before. There is a reason that lengthy interim appointments are the exception, not the rule. In addition to obviating the need to revisit an appointment every 120 days, the imprimatur of a Senate confirmation offers tangible benefits. It tells the courts and the litigants that the U.S. attorney has the backing of 2 branches of government and will presumptively lead the office for 4 years with a direct line of accountability to the president. I had never thought about that before. As we read earlier in this filing, the president has all the executive power, and then he delegates it to the heads of the departments. And then the heads of those departments delegate their authority to inferior officers. The Senate confirmation thing with U.S. attorneys, what it does is it tells the courts, the judicial branch, that this U.S. attorney who holds all this executive power is a person who is approved and endorsed by the Senate as well, the judicial branch. Or the legislative branch. So the executive and the legislative branch are endorsing this U.S. attorney to work in the judicial arena. So it's way more powerful, and since they're going to be there for 4 years, and they have a direct line of accountability to the president through the AG. I never thought about that before, but I love that. Just another thing that shows the genius of our Constitution. Okay. The executive has little incentive to forego those benefits across the board, which is why presidential appointment and Senate confirmation remain the norm, even though the FVRA allows the executive to fill vacancies with acting appointees for far longer than 120 days. And again, the claim that the government engaged in a gambit to avoid the district court and Senate makes no sense here, where the government let the district court make an appointment, allowed him to serve for 4 months, and then submitted Ms. Halligan for Senate approval. To the extent Section 546 is ambiguous, constitutional avoidance favors the government's reading. There are few functions more quintessentially executive than the investigation and prosecution of crimes. Article 2 therefore requires that the president have, quote, complete control over investigation and prosecution of violations of the law, including over the prosecutors who carry out those duties. Conversely, Article 3 requires courts to, quote, carefully abstain from exercising any power that is not strictly judicial in its character and which is not clearly confided to it by the Constitution. Congress may permit courts of law to appoint some inferior officers. That's Constitution Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. But Congress may not do so in a way that is incongruous with the appointer's judicial duties or unduly interferes with the proper functioning of the executive branch. Defendants' position steers into that constitutional concern by allowing Article 3 courts to control the appointment of a paradigmatic executive official even over the president's objection. On defendants' view, once the 120-day clock has run on the Attorney General's initial appointment, only the district court can appoint an interim U.S. attorney until there is a Senate-confirmed replacement. The president, of course, remains free to remove whomever the court selects, 28 U.S.C. 541c. But that arrangement raises the possibility that the court could continue making appointments unacceptable to the president, and the president could continue removing those appointees until the court picks someone to his satisfaction. That regime is far more profoundly destabilizing than one in which the Attorney General and District Court make simultaneous picks and the Attorney General's pick prevails. Courts ordinarily strive to avoid, not embrace, such interbranch conflict, which raises significant separation of powers issues. This case illustrates the danger. Presumably because the previous interim U.S. attorney was appointed by the judges of the Eastern District, those judges sua sponte transferred the present motions to this court. Other courts have felt compelled to transfer similar cases challenging U.S. attorney appointments. Courts should avoid an interpretation that would routinely put themselves in the uncomfortable position of being the subjects, not the arbiters, of cases or controversies. Instead, consistent with the Appointments Clause and the separation of powers, Congress gave district courts only a narrow, yet important, role in ensuring the efficient and continuous exercise of federal authority when the political branches fail to act, such as when the Senate fails to confirm the appointments of the president. Even were Ms. Halligan's appointment invalid, dismissal, especially with prejudice, would not be an appropriate remedy for what is at most a procedural misstep in how the Attorney General phrased the appointment. James's request for a prospective relief should also be denied now that the Attorney General has reappointed Ms. Halligan under other unchallenged authorities, meaning as a special attorney. Defendants' motions evince a fundamental mismatch between their assertion violation and their request for dismissal. While defendants assail Ms. Halligan's purportedly unlawful title, their indictments in no way depend on that title. No federal rule exists which demands that a U.S. attorney sign every indictment. Instead, an indictment need only be signed by, quote, an attorney for the government, end quote. Likewise, attorneys for the government may conduct grand jury proceedings. In many districts, assistant U.S. attorneys therefore routinely sign indictments, and any vacancy or defect in the U.S. attorney's appointment does not affect their power to do so. That is because, quote, their ability to act does not hinge on the authority of the local United States attorney, but derives from the Attorney General's plenary power over litigation to which the United States is a party. Likewise, any flaw in Ms. Halligan's appointment as attorney or interim U.S. attorney does not affect her ability to exercise the Attorney General's prosecutorial power. Whatever her title, Ms. Halligan is still an attorney for the government, authorized to conduct grand jury proceedings and sign indictments, just as she is an attorney for the government bound by the grand jury secrecy rule, protected by the government's attorney-client privilege, and entitled to a federal paycheck after the shutdown. By the way, if you think back to Jack Smith, this paragraph right here flies in the face of Judge Cannon's dismissal of Jack Smith, or of that case, because she ruled Jack Smith was unlawfully appointed. I'm going to keep bringing that back up. Because I think after reading all of this, I just don't see how Judge Cannon got it right. We may like that Judge Cannon dismissed the Dox case against Trump on the basis that Jack Smith was unlawfully appointed. But that doesn't mean that it was the right decision. And I think even if she ruled he was unlawfully appointed as a special counsel, he was still appointed under these same subsections, 509, 50, what is it, 505, 510, and 515, as an attorney for the government. So how does that warrant the dismissal of the indictment itself? And not that I think that Trump is actually guilty of anything in that case. I don't. But I've always been of two minds about it. Because on the one hand, Jack Smith was not Senate confirmed, and so therefore, how could he be a special counsel, which requires a Senate confirmed attorney? But he's also an attorney appointed by the Attorney General with the power to conduct legal proceedings. And how can it be that the AG doesn't have the power to appoint inferior officers and delegate his authority to them? He obviously does have that power. Which it's the exact same power that AG Bondi is using here with Halligan. The difference is in the title that they hold. I recently went back and read Judge Cannon's order, scanned through it, and read some of her key findings in it. And the more this filing right here convinces me of the lawfulness of Halligan's appointment, the less I'm convinced, or the more I'm convinced that Jack Smith was also lawfully empowered and authorized, let's say, even if he wasn't lawfully appointed to that office of special counsel. All right, the federal rules define an attorney for the government to include not just a United States attorney or assistant U.S. attorney, but any authorized assistant to the Attorney General or any other authorized by the law to conduct proceedings under these rules as a prosecutor. Quote, special attorneys operating under letters of authorization from the Attorney General may therefore conduct grand jury proceedings and sign indictments, even if the letter of authorization contained no express grant of authority to sign the indictments. The Attorney General has broad power to appoint subordinate officers to assist her in the discharge of her duties. United States v. Nixon, 1974. Specifically, she may specifically appoint attorneys to conduct any kind of legal proceedings, civil or criminal, including grand jury proceedings, which United States attorneys are authorized by law to conduct. Section 28 U.S.C. Section 515. She may appoint attorneys to assist United States attorneys when the public interest so requires. Section 543A. And she may make provisions as she considers appropriate to authorize any other officer, employee, or agency of the Department of Justice to perform any function of the Attorney General, Section 510 and 509. And she may appoint officials to detect and prosecute crimes against the United States, Section 533. Individually and collectively, those authorities amply authorize Ms. Halligan to conduct these prosecutions as an authorized assistant to the United States Attorney General, or an attorney authorized by law to conduct proceedings under federal rules as a prosecutor. To be sure, Ms. Halligan, her original appointment, cited only Section 546, consistent with the government's view that the Attorney General is not limited to a 120-day window to appoint interim U.S. attorneys. But an agency need not cite the specific statutory provision on which it relies when making a decision. And courts ordinarily interpret legal text to avoid rendering them invalid. There is no question that the Attorney General intended to vest Ms. Halligan with the powers of a U.S. attorney, and thus with the powers of a government attorney authorized to conduct criminal litigation, a fact that the Attorney General has confirmed by ratifying Ms. Halligan's appointment under her other authorities. Ms. Halligan's original appointment should not be read as a nullity, given the Attorney General's broad power to appoint prosecutors and delegate authority. Even if Ms. Halligan lacked the authority to obtain and sign indictments, the indictments are still valid for three independent reasons. First, the Fourth Circuit has long held the signature of a prosecuting attorney is no part of the indictment and is necessary only as evidence of the authenticity of the document. Accordingly, the improper signing of an indictment is not such a defect as would invalidate the instrument. It is a mere technical deficiency that is not necessarily fatal to the indictment. Multiple courts have therefore held that an indictment is not invalid if the prosecutor was not licensed to practice, if other evidence indicates that the government endorsed the prosecution. For example, where the only government attorney to present evidence to the grand jury and sign the indictment was suspended from the practice of law, a court held that the indictment was still valid because other government lawyers agreed with the grand jury that the indictment should issue, as evidenced by signatures on their later filings. Those cases confirm the validity of these indictments. There is no question as to the indictment's authenticity or the government's agreement with the grand jury's return of it. Other federal prosecutors with unchallenged appointments have signed subsequent filings. So, like the guy from Missouri and the two from North Carolina, they're in these two cases here. They've been making the filings in the cases. And the Attorney General has personally ratified both indictments here. That readily distinguishes cases like United States v. Providence Journal of 1988, where no authorized official approved of the challenged action. Second, even were a government attorney's signature necessary, and even were Ms. Halligan not a government attorney at the time, her actions would be entitled to de facto validity. The de facto officer doctrine confers validity upon acts performed by a person acting under the color of official title, even though it is later discovered that the legality of that person's appointment or election to office is deficient. That doctrine springs from the fear of the chaos that would result from multiple and repetitious suits challenging every action by every official whose claim to office could be open to question. That doctrine has such deep roots in Anglo-American law that early American courts considered it too well settled to be discussed. Even if the Attorney General failed to properly appoint Ms. Halligan an officer de jure, she was acting under color of official title, and her past actions are valid and binding. Defendants try to bootstrap their claimed violation of Section 546 into a violation of the Appointments Clause, citing Supreme Court cases declining to apply the de facto officer doctrine to certain Appointments Clause claims. According to defendants, any appointment not made in compliance with Section 546 is not authorized by law, and thus automatically violates the Appointments Clause. but not every action in excess of statutory authority is ipso facto in violation of the Constitution. As the Supreme Court observed in Ryder, a mere matter of statutory construction does not rise to an Appointments Clause violation. Ryder therefore distinguished the constitutional claim there that an inferior officer had not been appointed by the president, a court of law, or a department head, from a claim that a judge had been appointed to temporarily fill a vacancy in violation of a statute. Yet, on defendant's theory, every statutory violation would become a constitutional violation, since any appointment in violation of a statute would not be authorized by law. Regardless, the de facto officer doctrine equally applies to claims asserting the unconstitutionality of the mode by which the party was appointed or elected to legally existing office. Defendants' cases do not hold otherwise. Quoting something else, I'm going to skip it. All right. Defendants' other cases that they cite are even further afield. They invoke, hold on, I need a drink. He's picking apart the cases they cited, but I don't even feel like we need to go through it because I'm already convinced. Comey also cites the district court decision in United States v. Trump. That's Cannon's decision, which declined to apply the de facto officer doctrine and dismissed an indictment against President Trump on the ground that the special counsel's appointment was unlawful. But there, the court there found that appointment unconstitutional and irremediable because there was no, quote, statutorily created office to fill in the first place. And the court held the de facto officer doctrine cannot apply when there is no office to fill. Even on its own terms, that reasoning has no application here, where the office of U.S. Attorney plainly exists, and the question is just whether Ms. Halligan properly filled it. So, this filing is saying the distinction between is that Jack Smith, there was no office for him to be appointed to. He was appointed special counsel, supposed to be an independent office, but it's not an office that exists unless somebody actually can lawfully hold it and is appointed to it. And Jack Smith could not lawfully hold it because he wasn't Senate confirmed. And since he wasn't Senate confirmed, that then meant that that office wasn't in need of filling. That's something for me to think about. And here, just like in New Jersey, Nevada, and Southern California, and these other places where these interim appointments are made, there's an office that's always there. And it's always needs to have somebody at the head of it. I'm going to think on that some more. All right. Third, any error in defendant's indictments was harmless given the grand jury's independent decision to indict. The grand jury is a constitutional fixture in its own right that acts independently of the prosecuting attorney. They quote a bunch of other cases here. Failures by the executive branch, even prosecutorial misconduct before the grand jury, provide a court no authority to dismiss the indictment, absent a finding that defendant was prejudiced by such misconduct. In this context, prejudice requires that the government's misdeeds substantially influence the grand jury's decision to indict, and that there is grave doubt that the decision to indict was free from the substantial influence of such violations. Defendants cannot make that showing. Given the Attorney General's expansive power to appoint attorneys and delegate the Department of Justice's powers, there is no question that, as she has now made explicit, the Attorney General could have authorized Ms. Halligan to conduct grand jury proceedings and sign indictments even without an interim U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District by appointing her as a special attorney. The Attorney General could have also hired Ms. Halligan as an assistant U.S. Attorney making her an indisputable attorney for the government under Rule 1B1B. Defendant's basic claim, therefore, amounts to, at most, a paperwork error, that the Attorney General should have cited a different provision of Title 28 in appointing Ms. Halligan instead of adhering to the department's longstanding view that Section 546A authorizes successive interim U.S. attorneys. Absent her appointment under Section 546A, Ms. Halligan would not have been excluded from the grand jury room, as Comey claims. She would have simply had a different title. That kind of technical difference cannot establish the grave doubt required to take the extraordinary step of impugning a grand jury's decision to indict. Defendants seek to avoid harmless error review altogether, insisting that this case falls into the rare exception for cases in which the structural protections of the grand jury have been so compromised as to render the proceedings fundamentally unfair. But that exception is exceedingly narrow and is exemplified by a case-finding structural error where, quote, blacks had been systematically excluded from the grand jury. That precedent reflects the special problem of racial discrimination, a problem so pernicious that no showing of prejudice is required. These considerations have little force outside the context of racial discrimination in the composition of a grand jury. Any defect in Ms. Halligan's job title is not remotely comparable to the wholesale exclusion of minorities from the grand jury. In any event, the Attorney General, in whom Congress has vested all powers of the Department of Justice, has personally ratified defendants' indictments. When an officer allegedly appointed in violation of the Appointments Clause takes a challenged action, subsequent ratification by an official with the power to authorize that action cures any Appointments Clause defects that may have existed when the document was initially signed. Here, the Attorney General plainly could have authorized any Department of Justice officer or employee to sign or to obtain and sign the indictments, exercising the powers of the U.S. Attorney on her personal authority to conduct and argue any case in a court of the United States in which the United States is interested. The Attorney General's ratification therefore cures any flaw in both indictments from Ms. Halligan's appointment. Comey may respond that a ratifying principal must have been able to take that action at the time the ratification was made. And the statute of limitations for his offenses, but not James, expired before the Attorney General's October 31st ratification order. But when a timely filed indictment is, quote, dismissed for any reason after the period prescribed by the applicable statute of limitations has expired, a new indictment may be returned in the appropriate jurisdiction within 6 calendar months of the date of the dismissal. 18 U.S.C. Section 3288. Interesting. Because the Attorney General could personally obtain a new indictment using that grace period, she may ratify Comey's existing indictment. Comey previews that he disputes Section 3288's applicability, but does not say why. By its text, Section 3288 applies when an indictment is dismissed for any reason, which obviously includes a defective appointment. Section 3288 bars refiling only where the original indictment was untimely or was dismissed for, quote, some other reason that would bar a new prosecution. That language prevents the refiling of an indictment that was not capable of being cured. But where a valid indictment could have been brought in a timely fashion, the 6-month grace period merely allows the government to do the right thing, or to do what it had a right to do in the first place, I should say. Here, Comey does not dispute that a validly appointed federal prosecutor, be that a U.S. attorney, an assistant U.S. attorney, a special attorney, or the Attorney General herself, could have lawfully obtained this indictment. Section 3288's tolling rule would therefore govern any dismissal. James does not request dismissal with prejudice, and thus forfeits any such request. The maximum relief to which she could possibly be entitled is dismissal without prejudice, a remedy that would allow Ms. Halligan or any other government attorney to seek a new indictment now that the Attorney General has ratified the appointment under other unchallenged authorities. For his part, Comey seeks the harsh remedy of dismissal with prejudice, but as he recognizes that sanction is reserved for flagrant misbehavior, causing substantial prejudice where no lesser sanction will do. Comey cannot make that showing as to Ms. Halligan's appointment. Instead, he rehashes his vindictive and selective prosecution claims that are the subject of a different motion before Judge Nachmanov, over which this court lacks jurisdiction. But if Judge Nachmanov accepts those allegations and grants that motion, this court would have no need to adjudicate this motion. The court should therefore proceed on the assumption that Comey's vindictive and selective prosecution claims fail, or defer this motion until Judge Nachmanov rules on that motion. Zeroing in on the actual claim here that the Attorney General could not lawfully invoke Section 546A to appoint Ms. Halligan, Comey comes nowhere close to showing flagrant misbehavior, substantial prejudice, or the unavailability of a lesser action. The Attorney General's invocation of Section 546A, rather than her many other appointment authorities, is not flagrant misconduct akin to Brady violations. As explained above, Comey suffered no prejudice, much less substantial prejudice, from Ms. Halligan's title when she entered the grand jury room. And contrary to his assertion, the counterfactual where the Attorney General did not, in his words, unlawfully appoint Ms. Halligan, is not a world where the government would have let the limitations period run. Instead, the Attorney General would have cited a different authority that would have unquestionably authorized Ms. Halligan to obtain the exact same indictment at the exact same time. If the court deems the indictment invalid, any dismissal should be without prejudice to permit the government to swiftly seek re-indictment under 18 U.S.C. 3288. James, but not Comey, requests an injunction against Ms. Halligan, acting as an interim U.S. attorney. To the extent she requests relief beyond the confines of this case, that request is plainly improper. Equitable remedies like injunctions must be party-specific. James has no standing to seek an injunction against Ms. Halligan's participation in other cases. James' request is also improper to the extent that she seeks an injunction, a remedy that will not be appropriate in almost all federal criminal procedures or prosecutions. James may seek to disqualify Ms. Halligan from acting as U.S. attorney in this case. That remedy, while drastic, is at least potentially available in limited circumstances, but James' request has been overtaken by events. The Attorney General has ratified Ms. Halligan's appointment as special attorney with the authority to conduct criminal litigation in this district. Because Ms. Halligan now has the indisputable authority to proceed with this prosecution, prospective relief would be inappropriate. For the foregoing reasons, the motions to dismiss should be denied. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Quite long. 32 pages. But I found it so compelling that it's changed my mind. I don't think Lindsay Halligan is going anywhere, nor should she. All right, so that's it for this episode, guys. Thank you for joining me. If you would be so kind, I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love it if you gave me a comment, whether it's a yay or a nay, or a down with Comey, or Comey's my homie, or whatever. Just whatever. It helps me out, especially on YouTube. It helps me out a lot if you leave me a comment over there. Wherever you're watching or listening, though, I would really appreciate a like or a heart, a share. And if you want to be a supporter, the links are in my link tree. So thank you all very much. I enjoyed recording this, and I'm really looking forward to the next episode, because that's the one where we're going to get to all of those exhibits you've been seeing floating around social media. Comey's handwritten notes and the text messages and all of those things. So we're going to pick, that's probably going to be the only thing we do in that episode, is what I'm thinking right now, because there's quite a bit. So that episode's going to be focused on that filing from DOJ. And looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. All right. God bless each and every one of you. Hope you guys stay positive, regardless of the election results, regardless of what happens in this case. Stay positive, be righteous to one another, and stay human. I'll see you on the next one.